right, thank you, sir. As determined by roll call, 9 members of the ARB are present and therefore satisfy the ARB quorum minimum. The ARB bylaws state that a minimum of 6 members are required to determine a quorum. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
I second it. Joe Plumpy.
Second from Mr. Plumpy. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Third, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how do we arrange for public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this ARB to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. And that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the ARB and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the ARB may conduct this meeting electronically through WebEx, a county virtual meeting platform and available for access through the ARB County website or through phone at 1-844-621-3956 with the access code 2345-639-2280. It is so moved.
All right, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I'll second it.
I think Mr. Kalinsky beat you, Mr. Burns, so I'll give the second to him. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries.
All right, next, it is required that all matters addressed on today's agenda are statutorily required or necessary to continue the operations and discharge of this board's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved.
All right, motion, is there a second?
So moved.
Second from Mr. Burns. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Last but not least, the ARB needs to determine how long each member of the public will be able to speak during public comment periods. The public will be allowed to comment after consent agenda items and after each action item, as is ARB standard practice. I move that each member of the public will have 3 minutes to speak.
And there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Mr. Burns. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. The gavel back to the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. All right, now that we've gotten that cumbersome activity out of the way, seems like we can't make it any less than 6 minutes roughly, so can't make it your time. We now, staff, Denise, do you have any information you'd like to share about the virtual meeting platform, as well as any information for attendees to be aware of?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Daniel. Excuse me. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted online within 10 days. Attendees may email me during the meeting, use the Q&A box or the chat function in the WebEx platform for inquiries. Staff will monitor and respond accordingly. Attendees experiencing technical difficulties, please call the WebEx technical assistance at 1-866-799-3293.
All right, thank you so much, Denise. Now that we have all that out of the way, we begin every ARB meeting with a reading of the statement of purpose and intent of historic overlay districts. Both Ms. Orr and Mr. Zellman both asked to go for it, so I will defer to either one of them to which to like to read it.
It doesn't matter to me.
Go ahead, Jason.
All right. Historic overlay districts are created for the purpose of promoting the general welfare, education, economic prosperity, and the recreational pleasure of the public through the perpetuation of those general areas or individual structures and premises that have been officially designated by the Board of Supervisors as having historical, cultural, architectural, or archaeological significance. Regulations within such districts are intended to protect against destruction of or encroachment upon such areas, structures, and premises, to encourage uses which will lead to their continuance, conservation, and improvement in a manner appropriate to the preservation of the cultural, social, economic, political, architectural, or archaeological heritage of the county, to prevent creation of environmental influences adverse to such purposes, and to assure that new structures and uses within such districts will be in keeping with the character to be preserved and enhanced.
Thank you, Jason. Moving onward with our agenda. Next, I will just remind any applicants presenting that to please limit their first presentation to roughly about 8 minutes and any resubmissions to about roughly 3 minutes. I will also remind any members of the public or that wish to comment on items for consent or action that I will ask for those comments following the initial presentation if an application has a presentation, and Denise will check the FAQ section and the chat section to see if you have a comment. Then we'll call on you. Following that, we need to approve the agenda. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, either as presented or with any revisions.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Ord via hand gesture. I saw you do it. Okay. All right, so we have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstentions? None. Motion passes. The agenda is approved. Moving onward, introduction and recognition of guests. Denise, are there any guests that we need to identify and introduce?
I do not see any. Well, Ann Stuntz is on the line. She is a History Commission member. I asked if she wanted to be specifically introduced, and she didn't, but I thought she's not here representing an application, so I thought I would let you know that she is here.
All right, good to know. And do my eyes fail me, or did we lose Miss Murray? I believe we did. Don't see her. So
Not on my screen.
I don't see her either.
No.
Either.
Hopefully she'll.
hopefully it was
Come back
merely a
in.
technology snafu there.
Yes.
All right, we'll continue onward and hopefully she'll reemerge. That said, we move on to the next item, which is consent calendar action items. There's only one item for consent calendar action items. First and foremost, I'll just state it out, and then I'll look to see if there are any members of the public that have a comment. This is ARB 21 MTA 01, demolition of the tenant house in Mount Air located on Acatink Road. The applicant is proposing to demolish the tenant house previously approved by the ARB back in 2003. Dr. Kroll presented this to us previously and is representing the application. Are there any members of the public that wanted to comment on this single consent item, Denise?
I see no hands raised or chats.
All right. Hearing that, I would entertain a motion regarding the consent calendar item.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Zellman.
I'd move that the ARB approve consent item ARB 21-MTA-01 as submitted and presented at the January 13, 2022 ARB meeting. Upon review of the materials, the proposal is found to meet requirements of zoning ordinance 3101 historic overlay districts.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Burns. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the item carries. It is approved. Liz, if you're on the call, you know the drill. Denise will get with you. Thank you so much for your presentation last month, I believe it was.
And thank you very much.
All right, that moves us on to our items for action. We only have one item for action on our agenda tonight. This is ARB 22 LOR 01, proposed adaptive reuse of reformatory power plant. That's building R30, located in 8426 Reformatory Way in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area. This proposal is to construct 10 residential units within the building. Presentation is going to focus on the exterior changes to the building, including replacement windows and doors as necessary. This application was presented to us previously at the 2021 ARB meeting. Jack Perkins, Christopher Quayle, and Dave Voss from Elm Street Development represent the application.
Mr. Chairman, please note that I will need to recuse myself from consideration of this action item.
Understood, Mr. Burns. We will come reacquire you upon completion of this item. Yes, go walk out in the hall.
So I've made the group presenters. I just need to know who will be presenting so I can
Yeah, Mr.
Yes.
Perkins, Mr. Quayle, Mr. Boss, I think all of you should be made presenters. So I see Jack there on the screen.
Yep.
All right.
Denise,
Yeah.
I'm having
Yes.
a technical problem. I'm on using my Kindle because my computer decided to restart. So I'm going to try to get back on using my laptop instead of the Kindle. Will that cause problems?
No, I think you will be okay, Elise, because I've seen you come in and out of the meeting. But you might need to be here for the vote. Let's see. No, we have.
No, I'll keep the Kindle on until I get my
Okay.
laptop loaded up.
Mute yourself because we may get feedback when you come in under the other device. So if you could mute
Okay.
yourself. Thank you.
Just wanted to explain why I disappeared and why I look different.
We noticed
Thank
your absence, Elise, but we figured we'd see you back. All right, Mr. Perkins, I think, is there anyone that wants to present a presentation?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. First, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. I will start the presentation. And Chris Quall with Alexander Company is here. Chris is the architect. He is the technical expert, so I will defer to him on any specific technical questions. Let me start I will share my screen. And we all should be looking at
We are seeing your
illustrative site plan.
presentation showing a map of the Laurel Hill area.
There we go. And let's see. Do you see the full slide, or are you seeing all of my screen with?
We're seeing all of your screen. So if there's any way you can make it the full presentation, particularly obviously if Ms. Murray right now is functioning on a secondary device, be helpful.
There we go. Is that better?
We now can see your notes in the next slide, so it's in presenter mode. I believe the staff here know a trick out of doing this is clicking something on the box that says display settings. Right towards the top.
Right there? No.
Jack, on the top, this is Laura, on the top of your box right there in the middle where it says display settings.
Yes.
You can show taskbar, click on that. And
Okay.
then swap that one. Yep.
Ah, there we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you very
Laura.
much. So as the chairman said, we were before you in September making the initial workshop presentation. And we're here this evening to follow up and seek action on the proposed exterior modifications to R30, the powerhouse building. That is the purple building there in the center. And I apologize, the text on the call outs is a little small, but if you can see my cursor, I'm circling the powerhouse building there. And Laura, how do I advance my slide?
So I think if you just go to the left corner of your screen, you put your cursor to the left corner, a little arrow will pop up, or you can use the arrow buttons on your computer.
Okay.
So the left bottom corner.
Oh, left bottom corner.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
And I think I skipped ahead a couple of slides. Okay, this is the civil engineering site plan that shows specifically where the powerhouse building is. It shows the reformatory buildings to the west and the new townhomes to the east. So this really is just for reference and orientation. And now we're looking at photographs of the existing building. And in the upper left, we've got north elevation, existing conditions. And in the south elevation, exterior condition, where the red box is, that is where we would propose to install an awning sash that would provide emergency egress. And that would be an aluminum frame replacement. And we would be proposing to replace the window below the half circle window. So not just what's in red, but everything down to the lintel there. And it would be a reproduction window in aluminum. And the profiles of the muntins would match the existing. We do not have shop drawings yet for those replacement sashes, but those shop drawings do have to be submitted to the SHPO and to the National Park Service for approval. And I would propose that when we submit for building permit, that we would include those approved shop drawings for review by Denise, if that is acceptable to the board. So this window would get replaced, and then in the lower right there, where you're seeing the east elevation, the left window there would receive a casement style sash for emergency egress, both on the left and the right, if you can see both of those. And here we've got floor plans that show the specific locations of the egress windows and doors. We've got the ground floor plan on the left. We've got the first floor plan, which is at street level on the right. And then a second floor mezzanine, and it's showing the egress windows. Those are on the east elevation there. And then the third floor on the north elevation, there would be a new egress window in that location. These are the colored elevations. Again, we're showing a new aluminum egress casement window here. This would be a new egress door and new storefront glass surrounding it. Here we've got a new aluminum window with the egress sash. We've got a new egress door built into this larger door and window assembly. Chris, can you confirm that that is a door within that larger door?
Yes, that's correct. So currently there's a very large oversized door that was used for the plant. And we intend to keep that door, but we needed to egress through it. So the way it's constructed is that we are essentially cutting a new door opening into that larger overhead, or not overhead door, but that larger swing door. What we'll be doing is we'll be trying to match the color of that door and try to minimize the profile as much as possible so that we don't lose the character of the larger door.
Okay. And we have in the middle there another new exterior door. So on this facade, we've got 3 egress doors and 1 egress window. All right, now to the east elevation. These are the casement egress windows on the left and the right that we saw in the photograph. And coming around to the south elevation, we have a new egress door, similar to the one that we looked at on the north elevation. And again, under the half circle window, we would be replacing all of that window from the lintel up to the half circle window, and it would have an awning sash in the middle. Coming around to the west elevation, Chris, I don't think we have any alterations on this elevation. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And at our workshop session, a question was raised about window treatments and how the building, would appear when illuminated, especially at night. Now that it's being used for residential use, and we would propose installation of a manual roller shade similar to this that would provide privacy. Chris, what is the how opaque are these shades? They allow some light through, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. They can be specified in different levels of opacity. For this application, we would typically use like a 3% opacity to ensure that you don't have much visual transmittance through it, so you can't necessarily see people. But you would get the sense of a slight glow of lights behind it. Similar daylight can pass through it. I don't know if you can see it very well in this picture, but you can kind of see an outline of the building behind in that shade. But you really can't see any of the detail, and that's really the intent of what we would like to accomplish there.
And that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins. Before we jump to that, first I want to make sure, going through my process here, sorry, that we see if there are any members of the public that have any comments on this item. Denise, are there any hands raised, questions put out?
I do not see anybody chiming in, Chris.
All right. And I think you already answered one of the preliminary questions I was going to have about VDHR concurrence with this, and you said that at least for the windows, that's still that's going to be you're going to be waiting on that once the shop drawings are completed.
That is correct. Chris, can you briefly describe the where the Part 2 application is?
Yeah, I believe we have a preliminary send in our plans, get a read on scope. So once we get through this process, I think we'll be wrapping up our entire plan set and submitting for our Part 2, HR service. We'll be submitting the entire exterior elevation as well as the interior floor plans.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Perkins and Chris, for clarifying that. So I'll go around to all the members to see, since we have no comments from members of the public, see if they have any questions. Ms. Aubrey.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. I have no comments or concerns. The project is fine as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Burns has recused himself from this one. Ms. Wan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I have no question and no comment.
Thank you, ma'am. I believe that brings us along to Mr. Kalinsky.
Yes, just want to thank the applicant for listening to us in our workshop. You seem to keep the integrity of the existing windows with this new design. So very pleased with it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Miss Murray, there you are. Different camera. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. All right, Miss Murray, the floor is yours.
I think that it looks perfectly early 20th century industrial and have no comments.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, moving onward, that brings us to Miss Orr.
I think it's a handsome solution to a very difficult, challenging project. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Plumpy.
No comments. Jack, excellent presentation. Look forward to seeing this building habitable. Thank you.
All right. And Mr. Zellman.
No concerns. Looks good to me. Thank you.
All right. I would agree with my colleagues. I really appreciate you taking into account our feedback during the workshop session. I also appreciate you pointing out that the shop drawings for the windows are not ready yet and offering that as a potential condition we could put on the approval of the application that they be submitted to Denise once they've gone through. I personally, if someone makes a motion, would like to see that included in there. I'm disappointed that this building couldn't be used for another purpose, and that obviously it's having to be used for residential. I mean, that's not a bad thing. It's being reused, but I was looking forward to the potential for this to have a unique use in there, but I'm happy that we found a way to adapt with that. And I agree with Ms. Orr that you found a way to navigate a unique situation with the windows while maintaining the integrity of the exterior. Those are all the comments I have. With that in mind, I would entertain a motion by any member. Would remind that the applicant has offered a potential condition that we could place on it.
All right. Try to craft one for you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the ARB approve action item ARB-22-LOR-01 located at 8426 Reformatory Way in the Laurel Hill Adaptive Reuse Area at tax map 107-1 (09) for the proposed necessary exterior alterations to adaptively reuse the building for residential purposes as submitted and presented at the January 13th, 2022 ARB meeting, subject to the following conditions: that the window shop drawings be presented at the time of building code submission and approved by Ms. Dressel.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Ms. Vaughn. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Perkins and your team. Denise will get with you afterwards with the information and look forward to seeing you all again in the future, I'm sure.
Very good. Thank you so much.
All right, that completes our items for action. And Denise will escort our new attendees out, and we will switch over to Ms. Arsenault for our workshop session for ARB 22 MTV 01WS, proposed Holland Hills Historic Overlay District, consisting of 492 parcels. This proposal is to create a new historic overlay district for the Holland Hills Historic District. Staff is going to be presenting us with an analysis of the potential creation of the new historic overlay district, including some maps on contributing and non-contributing properties, the draft zoning ordinance and plan amendment, as well as the guidelines. Ms. Laura Arsenault represents this application. Hello, Laura. Good to see you.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Laura Arsenault for the record. I am working and hopefully almost done with Holland Hills. We're on year 4, well, 3.5, almost 4. But we are getting hopefully close to the end, however it ends. Did you ask for John to come back, by the way?
Good point. We should summon John back. How we do that, I don't know. Normally one would step out in the hallway and holler, but
I'm wondering if someone can text him.
I'll try to text him.
Anyway, well, I'll start because I know he's intimately familiar with the neighborhood. So anyway, once again, Laura Arsenault, I'm coming to you tonight to I think workshop this for the second time. Last time I came to you in July of 2021, and we were hoping to move it forward at that time. It was determined that the supervisor, Stork, would like a poll to be conducted of the community before we went further on the project. And so we went on hold for a couple months, and here we are back now. So what I'm presenting to you tonight are, as a workshop, are our draft findings in our staff report. I want to give you a little update on the timing before I go into it, because it's going to be a very tight turnaround when I come to you for action in February. The staff report is due to be published on February 8th, and the ARB is February 10th. So, and then we're going to the Planning Commission at the end of February, and then to the board March 8th. So we do not have a lot of time, and we don't even have the March ARB meeting to be able to make a motion on the Holland Hills. So I just want to put that out there as some guidance when thinking about questions and concerns that you have when I go through the presentation. So I know you've all seen this before, and Denise, oh, thanks. I asked Denise to present for me because I have a lot of trouble when you present on WebEx. I can't ever find people again. So then I'm always trying to find people. So, okay. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So we've got the zoning numbers now and the plan amendment numbers, as you see. And then Denise, next slide, please. So location, as you all are well aware, this is in the Mount Vernon district located in Alexandria. The Board of Supervisors had a motion on July 31st, 2018, and directed staff to consider the establishment of a historic overlay district. With that, they asked us to look at a zoning ordinance amendment, a comprehensive plan amendment, a rezoning to add the historic overlay district to the rezoning map, and also draft design guidelines for the Holland Hills Historic Overlay District. As I mentioned, staff left presented to the ARB in July of 2021, and since then we've completed a community poll in September of 2021, and 62% of the responses were in favor of the Historic Overlay District. And we had a very high response rate. I want to say 82% of the community that was eligible to respond did. So we had a lot of interaction. That was very good to hear. And that, like I said, 62% is in favor of the creation of the Holland Hills Historic Overlay District. So that's some really good community feedback that we received. Denise, next slide. So staff analysis and findings in the zoning ordinance, the old one and the new one, as we've come into July of 2021, staff is required to complete a report with analysis and findings, and I've kind of outlined that for you here. Analysis of current conditions, description of individual structures and premises of interest, meaning defining characteristics as and features, as we say. Identified specific features to be preserved. We recommended contributing and non-contributing properties, and we recommended historic overlay district boundaries, and also look at adverse effects that could negatively affect the district. We worked with traceries. You all have seen the design guidelines in a number of draft form, and the latest version will be to you with the that we can get to you before the staff report is published, but the latest version of that. Once again, the zoning ordinance amendment and the comprehensive plan amendment. Next slide, please. So starting with current conditions, the final number of parcels is 492. There's a lot, and a huge addition to the current purview we have in the historic overlay district. I'm not going to say it's more than all the historic overlay districts combined, but it's a pretty good number. 468 are privately owned with residences on them, on most of them. 14 are owned by the Civic Association of Holland Hills, that's in the orange on the map. And 8 are owned by the Fairfax County Park Authority, those are in green. And then 2 are owned by the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. One lot continued to flood, and the county ended up buying it and demolished the property, so now it's a park. And another one is, I think it's a water treatment kind of pump facility. The existing land use is primary residential, and the underlying zoning is primarily R2, which is residential 2 dwelling units an acre. And those are all the ones in red for the most part. Denise, next slide. This is a lot of words, and I apologize for that. I'll just give you an overview, and I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with the ARB as part of the package for next month. But basically what it says is we have to determine the public importance for the preservation of Holland Hills, and that's in the zoning ordinance section, the new section 3101.3A. And basically what we talked about earlier and in the opening statement, that the historic overlay district must meet one of the 8 criteria in order for the board to determine the HOD possesses historic, architectural, archaeological, or cultural significance. So in staff's analysis, we found that it met provision number 3 in the zoning ordinance, which is there in italics, and that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, represents the work of a master, possess high artistic values, or represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components may lack individual distinction. Sorry, I think that, oh, maybe okay. Anyway, so we found that it met that criteria by the 2 items on the right there, by exemplifying contemporary style architecture that possesses high artistic values, and by representing a distinguishable entity whose components lack individual distinction due to the unique plan and physical relationship between the separate residential structures. So its value as a district is very important in addition to its unique architecture. Next slide. And then we talk about specific features to be preserved. We concurred with the National Register nomination period of significance, which was 1946 to 1971. 1946 is when the developer bought the plat of the property, and then 1971 is when the last residence within that original boundary was completed. And then the contributing features, as we talked with the work group and the community, were the sculptural brick chimneys, masonry end walls, large wall expanses of windows, the roof styles, including the shallow pitch gable, flat shed, or V-shaped butterfly, the preservation of natural landscape topography by selecting minimally invasive building siting, and architectural features characteristics of the contemporary style. And this is Nicole Brennan's favorite house, so that's why I put that one in here. Homage to Nicole, who helped a lot with this project. And then if you go to the next slide, Denise. So these are the contributing and non-contributing properties that staff has recommended. Once again, there's 492 parcels, 454 were contributing, those are in green, and the 38 non-contributing historic properties are in pink. And those large properties on the boundary are non-contributing because they're park authority owned and they weren't part of the original plat, but they help serve a visual buffer to the community and kind of protect some additional area. Next slide, please. So here's the staff recommended boundaries. We've seen them a couple times, but this map specifically shows the National Register boundary versus what staff proposed to add. So all the properties in orange were the National Register boundary, and staff looked at additional 10 parcels there in blue. We added those Park Authority lots I just mentioned, and also 2 lots owned by the board. We also looked at on the southern third of the property, and I'm going to ask to change the coloring of this because I think it's still too confusing. Those maps that are those 2 parcels that are light blue. One is the Holland Meadows Swim and Tennis Club, and the other one is Holland Meadows Elementary School. And we determined that both of those, we did not want to include those in the historic overlay district. And the next slide. So staff identified the following adverse effects in the community, including partial and complete demolitions of the property of the structures, new construction, additions to residential dwellings, swimming pools, and fences. And those were all discussed at length with the community and the work group. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, the draft design guidelines will be ready for your review, dated January 6, 2022. And the draft will also be included, as it was with Wellington, in the staff report for consideration and as an information item to the board. They won't be acting on it. The ARB will have the final approval authority over the design guidelines if the board adopts the Holland Hills Historic Overlay District. Next slide, please. So the zoning ordinance amendment part, we're creating a brand new historic overlay district, much like Wellington, and most of the proposed regulations defer to the underlying zoning districts as they do for the other existing historic overlay districts. The only additional standard that we changed was that we were limiting the height of all structures, not just residential structures, to 35 feet. So what that means is in the R2 district, there's a regulation that says residential structures can't exceed 35 feet, but all other structures can be up to 60 feet. So what we did was just limited the other structures to 35 feet as well. Next slide, please. So the comprehensive plan amendment and the rezoning, the comprehensive plan amendment is really administrative in nature and changing all the references in the comprehensive plan to a historic overlay district reference if it's adopted. And then the rezoning is to add the boundary map to the actual rezoning, the boundary to the actual zoning map. So it's administrative in nature too, but requires a rezoning in order to change the zoning map. Next slide, please. So here's next steps. January 25th, we're hoping that it goes to board authorization to, to the Board of Supervisors to authorize public hearings for the February 23rd and the March 8th Planning Commission and board hearings. On February 2nd, we're hoping to present to the History Commission for their information. On February 8th, the staff report will be published. On February 10th, like I said, it's a tight timeline. We're hoping the ARB will take action on the Holland Hills HOD. On February 23rd, going to the Planning Commission, March 8th to the board. And then if it is approved, looking to adopt the design guidelines in late spring of 2022. And I think that's it. Yes, that is it. So thank you, Denise, for running the PowerPoint. Are there any questions for me? I know that's a lot of information. We've seen it a couple times and I went through it very quickly. So happy to answer questions.
Well, Laura, just like normal, we'll hopefully, do we get John? There's John. Okay, good. We have John back. We'll go around with everybody and let everyone throw questions at you, see what they have.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Laura, for the presentation and for all the work that's gone into this. I do have a question about the poll that Supervisor Stork had requested and the results. At least the material that we had been given in advance, numbers were a little bit different from the numbers you had, but not that you said tonight, but not too different. But I am concerned that about almost 30% of the home owners did not submit a response to the survey, and so are there any plans for any follow-up to try and determine what those 30% of homeowners think about the proposal?
At this time, there's no plans to do follow-up on that. From my understanding, and I can speak to the supervisor a little bit more too, was that he wanted a certain threshold to be met in order to move forward on, writing the staff report, going to authorization, and the community met that threshold at 62%. I think there was an understanding we'd never get everybody on board, but or voting, but we had a very, very high turnout. I want to say 62% responded yes, but I think we had an 82% of eligible voters vote in the poll, which if you do survey work, that's a really high amount. We're lucky to get one in 50% sometimes. But at this point, there's no discussion to go back, have a community meeting, or do additional outreach for the poll.
All right, I guess no other questions, Michelle. Okay, Mr. Burns.
I know you have a bunch of questions, John.
We can't hear you though,
Sorry.
John. Tilt your mic down.
You're muted.
No, I think his earpiece is not at his mouth.
Oh, your microphone,
Tilt your microphone down.
Yep. I turned it away so I could eat dinner quickly while you guys were talking about the Lurton property. My apologies. Laura, if I could ask for a bit of clarification on the 62%. 62% of the people who voted, or 62% of the homeowners who were eligible to vote? That's a big difference.
Correct. 62% of the people that voted.
Okay. And 80% voted.
Correct. So 80%
Right, okay.
out of the total, yes, 80% of the, we called them allowable votes, voted. And then
Okay.
of that 80%, 60, and they're not one for one, but yes, that 62% voted
Okay.
in favor.
Okay. So even though it says 62%, the reality is that it's a fairly substantial number in terms of elections and like. You mentioned in your presentation the significance of the arrangement of the buildings in relation to one another. But the purview of the ARB and Historic Overlay District Ordinance is primarily architecture. So what is it that the Historic Overlay District guidelines and the ARB can do to protect the collective significance of the interaction of these buildings with one another? In other words, the cultural landscape in which they exist.
I think that's a good question. And you're right in that the HODs primarily support the preservation of the architecture. I think it is significant to note that the purview also extends to kind of land disturbance. 2,500 square feet is the threshold for that, and not a lot of these lots would go to that much disturbance for specific items. However, the way the zoning ordinance is written now is even properties that are non-contributing or even properties that are non-contributing within viewshed of contributing properties would still have to come in for additional review. The design guidelines further go into detail about landscaping, recommended, types, driveway features, things like that, that we can't really control in the zoning ordinance, but give further recommendation and guidance to homeowners and the ARB on kind of preserving that significance. Another thing too, we looked at by evidence of the pool and the fences, those are features of the landscape that aren't necessarily architecturally related, but are adverse effects to the district. So we tried to kind of saddle that line because it is a very unique and distinct part of Holland Hills, but we're very limited in what we can do, put in the zoning ordinance specifically about landscape and that type of thing.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot to explain that. I just want to make sure everybody in the ARB understood that the HOD can only protect certain aspects of the overall significance of the property, not everything. So thank you for that clarification. You had mentioned additions and fences as being things that diminish the overall cultural significance of the lot. I would say yes, but since the community has long-standing guidance to avoid perimeter fencing, we have instead had perimeter property line plantings. And so I think to a certain extent, that is a more significant impediment to the historic landscape environment than the fences are. So that is a distinction, but if people say don't build fences, they plant bamboo, they plant all sorts of things along their property lines. And that helps to, this is pretty much as effective as a chain link fence in terms of dividing up these properties and contravening the original open landscape that was the original design intent. That's just a comment. That's not something you can change, but it's something that the community has struggled with. You had mentioned a 35-foot total height limit. In most of the county for residential stuff, that is 35 foot to the midpoint of the roof slope. Is that the case here, or is it 34 feet to the, or 35 feet to the tallest part of the roof?
To be completely honest, measuring height is a very delicate thing in the county, and I don't have my zoning ordinance my ZAD counterpart, Lily Yegazoo, who's been working with me on that. I know with specific heights, it's mentioned differently to the eave versus the midline of the roof. That is one of the reasons why we did not put recommend a more strict limit on the height of a structure, because it's measured from all four corners of the structure to the lowest point. You know, there's I want to say it's like converting Celsius to Fahrenheit. Like, it's just a very convoluted calculation. So in order to try to keep some clarity and some discretion to the ARB, that's why we just left it at the 35. I can't really answer the question if it's to the midline of the roof. I think it depends on they're all built into the landscape, so that's another factor that gauges into the actual height. So I'm just not sure at this point, but I can find out for you.
Okay. And does that 35-foot measurement come from the existing first floor level of the house? I know the county has tried to discourage people from mounding up their lots and then building their mansion on top of that. So is that also impacted by this?
I'm not sure, John. I'm not, like I said, I'm not Lily's not here tonight, but that's
okay.
I'll follow up with her on the height questions and get back to the ARB with an answer. I just don't have like I said, I know it's a very convoluted process to measure the height, and I'll find out for you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then the last thing that actually I have a concern with some of the properties that were listed as contributing versus non-contributing. And when is it we should be providing feedback on that? Is it in part of the design guideline review, or is that part of the initial package, or how do we comment on that, and when is it appropriate to comment on that?
I think it would be appropriate next month to comment on that.
Okay.
At this point, we have made our determinations, and you can just point out in the staff, which ones you agree with and which ones you don't agree with. But I would recommend putting it in written letter, because it's only because we have 492, but which ones we have concern about and which ones you disagree with, because staff is making recommendations on these. There's room for discussion, but if the supervisor makes the ultimate decision on how many are contributing and non-contributing, so if there's one or two that we need to go back and have further discussion on, we can do that as well. So.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much for that. And then the January 6, 2022 guidelines. Do we have copies of that yet, or is that forthcoming?
It's forthcoming.
That is forthcoming. Okay.
Yeah, I just got them, I think, earlier this week. So I didn't confuse everybody for review tonight. So I just left them till the next meeting. But you'll get those before. You'll get those before the staff report, because I already have those. It's just a matter of the staff report's not going to be published until the 8th. So.
Okay. And then last question. There is a house that has come before the local design review committee with a proposal for demolition. And I was wondering, how will the county react to an application for a demolition permit in a pending historic overlay district?
So how it happens now is, since the historic overlay district doesn't exist at this point, we have it flagged as it is on the inventory of historic sites, and so it would still come to county staff for comment. And if it does come to us, hopefully, we can flag it and ask for additional comment. That was something that was brought up, I think, at one of the work group meetings, if I'm not mistaken, about What happens if the board adopts the HOD, but the design guidelines aren't in place yet, or something similar along those lines of how do we deal with it in the intermediary? I have those questions into the county attorney and the similar questions into the county attorney. But do you know the address of the or you can send it to me offline as well, of the one that's proposed to be
Off
demolished?
the top of my head, I don't know the street address, but I do know the street. But I will email you that.
Yeah, that'd be
There's
great.
information about it. Okay.
And we can flag the street file so that if it does come in for demolition, we can elevate it as need be, possibly to Supervisor Stork to, you know, move forward on that or not.
Okay, and then I no more questions, but I do have one last comment, and that is I am very grateful for your work, for Nicole Brannon's work, and particularly with the People's Republic of Holland Hills work group. That at times the people who sat on that are laughing. They understand what I'm talking about. At times, contentious meetings, and you stuck through it and conducted everything in a very professional, courteous, and deliberate and even-handed manner. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Thank you for all that work.
Thank you, John. And I want to extend that to Kira Davis as well. I know she's not here anymore, but she did a lot of the ground truthing with us, taking pictures of buildings. And thank you. I appreciate that. I hope we've made some good progress, and talking with Denise about Holmesford Acres. We've got another one coming down the pike. So we've learned a lot. So thank you, John.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Burns. Ms. Wong?
I have no question and no comments. I applaud for the great work.
Thank you. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kalinsky.
Yes, question for Laura. Getting back to the landscape features, is this were you saying that the pools and fences, which can diminish or take away from it, are those items that we will be able to regulate, or are those something that won't be under our purview?
Unfortunately, on the outright, they're not under the ARB's purview. If they don't require a building permit, or don't require a site plan, and a site plan triggers disturbance of 2,500 square feet or more, it wouldn't necessarily come to the ARB for review. And that's what we really struggled with the fences, is that fences are allowed to be built without permits in certain cases. And we do go into a lot more detail on that in the staff report, but basically it says, it's almost like a buyer beware on the fences and the pools. Like if, and I also call them secondary reviews, because if an applicant comes in and wants to build like a pool house, and lots aren't that big, but hey, it could happen, a pool house and a pool, anything that comes in with that submission, fences, what have you, would all be under the ARB, would be able to comment on that. The ones we're more concerned about are the singular fences that are going up, and they can be by right fences, but we just have no purview because there's no building permit required to do that. So hopefully they'll reach out to us and chat with us about whether or not a permit is required or a site plan is required. But as John kind of pointed out, there's a lot of stuff that we can't regulate with the landscape.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a death by 1,000 cuts if it happens that way. John, is there anything in the homeowners association review that prevents or prohibits that?
Yeah, officially in the guidelines, fences that particularly property line fences are discouraged. Privacy screens are allowed, dog runs are allowed, and generally the idea is that the fence should be as transparent and invisible in the landscape as possible. Oftentimes that's kind of like what's called farm fencing, forest green or black on metal spikes, and it kind of blends into the landscape pretty well. But we do have a couple of split rail fences, one of which is historic, And then there's an occasional homeowner will put up those vertical picket closely spaced fences, and then you just create a barrier. And so, yeah, but that's something the community has always struggled with. There's been a lot of verbal discouragement of that, but the reality is that somebody puts up a fence, it's an overnight thing, it's done. There's nothing you can do about it. Our covenants say that you have to seek to enjoy before completion. And so a shed that you buy from Home Depot and slide off the back of the truck, you know, it's instantaneous. There's no way of preventing people from doing that. The same is true with fences. And also when they put in the 6-panel front door, there's nothing we can do about that. It just happens and it's done.
I will say too, John and Steve, the design guidelines do try to help give some guidance on that and go above and beyond what is permitted or allowed by site plan. So they do give some guidance if someone comes. There are recommendations in the design guidelines for fences, including location, height, you know, style, if one is needed. And there also are discouraged types too. So that's the design guidelines are really looked at that, trying to fill some of those gaps that we couldn't actually regulate with the zoning ordinance.
The real positive thing is that the district itself has remained pure, and which makes it so obvious that this is something special and important, that people buying in there looking to throw up big fences and park trailers and things like that aren't going to be interested in buying in the neighborhood to begin with. So hopefully that mutual respect carries through, and this just helps reinforce it. So other than that, thank you for all your work.
Thanks.
And all your cohorts.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kalinsky. Ms. Murray.
I'm just happy the end is in sight.
Collective sigh of relief. I started writing this staff report in January of 2020. So I am ready to be complete with it, however it ends.
Well, that means you wrote it during a very thoughtful time, so that's part of the effect.
It was before COVID. It was really it was on the cusp of COVID. And so, yes, thank you.
Mind you, I first recommended this to the community as something to consider in 1995.
So it's only 30 years.
Yep.
I had to finish 6th grade, John, before I could really tackle that. Miss Orr, sorry, I don't mean to derail us there.
Just for clarity, my understanding is that we can't really stop anyone from building what they can build by right, correct? To the extent of the setbacks, we haven't written in there any limiting % lot coverage that would definitely guarantee a more adhesive neighborhood appearance. I guess that is one of the things that I've we've done a great job in this process, but I still don't think that we're able to stop the large homes that people are wanting to build. I mean, we can maybe stylize some. I mean, just help me. You know, I'm sitting in on Holland, and Holmes Run, and I'm worried about that same thing, that we really can't stop what they're hoping we can stop. Help me.
Yeah, the benefit of the historic overlay district is the additional review authority by the architectural review board, and sometimes you get approval with building permits. So what that does is it forces them to come to the ARB and get recommendations on what they're proposing. Now, the ARB rarely denies applications.
Right.
So if they feel strongly enough that it does not meet the design guidelines, then they can recommend denial. We've kind of couched it in a way to leave it as broad as possible and leave a majority of the discretion up to the ARB, because the neighborhood is so unique in its design. And some of the houses that are contributing have towers, and there's just so many things also that we can anticipate. We've talked about solar panels a little bit, that we have to allow for some flexibility and some interpretation when it comes down to, I want to put an addition on. You know, they are subjective and up to interpretation on style. So really the key in the enforcement is the ARB extra oversight. And that's what will limit the height, because if, you know, it comes in at 35 feet and it's fantastically designed, maybe it'll go through. I mean, I'm being facetious, but it could possibly go through based on that. And the other thing we keep saying, we don't want to keep it in amber. We want the neighborhood to be able to evolve with the carports and some garages, or don't see John rolling his eyes, but yes, we want it to be able to evolve, because the whole point of preservation is to keep it being able to be lived in. And if we limit it to that degree, it's not going to be sustainable, right? So I hear you. There's no good answer, but that's my elevator speech on why the real key is the extra ARB review. And there is a lot of power in saying, we do not approve your building permit because we don't agree with the height that you have proposed. So that's where and they can appeal. The homeowner can appeal. I'm sorry, I'm talking to death about just cut me off, Chris. But the homeowner can appeal if they do not agree with the ARB's decision. So there are methods in place that if the homeowner does not agree with the ARB and wants to have the 35-foot house, they can appeal to the board, and then the Board of Supervisors, and then they'll make a decision. So there are methods.
Right, it's not really the height, it's the extent and the size, because the setbacks and the percent of the lot that is covered.
It's the name of the game, Kay, with preservation. We have the limited tool we have, and I don't like to say force. We require the applicant to come to us, and we're not forcing them. They can choose not to do their project. But, ultimately, as you said, they could come with something that we wholly disagree with, and we indicate that we disapprove and reject the application, and they could petition an appeal of it. What the hope is that we might be able to find a middle ground. And I would say, only in my short time here, the members that we have now and the ones we've even had before have always strived to try to find a way to get to an approval, because we'd rather do that than have a battle up above us. Because once it gets to the Board of Supervisors, it's no longer a conversation amongst designers and homeowners and professionals. It's a conversation amongst politicians, and I'm no opinion there, but that means they're making a decision based on county objectives, no longer one of preservation.
Yeah,
Politicians and attorneys.
Yeah. Well, we have an attorney, and he's wonderful, so I didn't want to.
The attorneys are the worst.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interject there. Kay has no other comments. You're good, Kay? Okay.
I'm good.
Joe?
Really no comments. I have had been there several times over the years. I know some people in there, and it's nice. Having the different plantings along the property lines and everything, that's going to be a challenge, because that's really tough to restrict, but you could always restrict perhaps heights, vegetation types, and so forth. That's have been done already, John, to maybe ease your angst about it. People are people. I live in a development that we have no design guidelines at all, and we're in large acreage, but someone could put up a pig farm, and because it's okay to do in the county code. So I feel Kay's concerns too. It's one of those, is hopefully level heads will prevail with this. So, but anyways, Laura, I applaud about all the work we've done. It's a historical district that definitely needs to be done. Incidentally, there's a lot of older suburban developments that are not or as old or something, that are in Fairfax Station in this part of the county too as well, that it'd be interesting if some of that came up. Like I live in a development that's done in the 60s. Okay, it's the first part of it, but it's not done by a contemporary designer. It's an eclectic mix. But anyways, enough said. But hey, great! I'm excited for it, so I'm pretty jazzed up. So no problem. Can't wait for the first application. We can see how it goes up the flagpole. That's what I'm saying.
I think John should go first and just do some things
Darn
himself,
right.
and that would just. But Joe, I would ask you, when the design guidelines come in, please take a special notice of the landscape part to
Sure.
give any recommendations on that. The design guidelines is going to be y'all's bread and butter of, you know, how we guide, how we.
Yeah, no problem.
applicants.
Because yeah,
Yeah.
without question, kudzu and bamboo everywhere. Done.
Yes. Thank
Sure.
you.
Yep.
Thanks, Joe. Mr. Zellman.
Two things for me. One, I echo, I think it was Mr. Burns said that Laura's professionalism in running those work group meetings was fantastic, with dealing with multiple different personalities and individuals with very strong and passionate feelings, one way or the other. And I thank Kay and Elise for also being on the work group. And I think I'm just having a misremembrance from your presentation, Laura, but what are we doing? Are we doing what? I'm completely forgetting when we're doing approval. I'm sorry.
What, of the, to the board
Jason.
or the ARB?
ARB.
Okay.
ARB.
The ARB is looking for approval on February 8th or February
Okay,
10th. I'm sorry, February 10th.
That's what I thought. And we're still planning, I assume, and I brought this up in the past, I know.
That was gonna be my part two. If you're gonna talk about meeting setup,
Yep.
I wanted to get.
I have a lot of questions about that too.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
So I won't jump the gun then. I will wait.
Okay.
I don't have anything else for now.
Thanks, Jason.
You got it.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. I'll echo again, Laura. Obviously, Nicole's not here, and Denise as well. All the county staff that put effort into this. Fantastic. Denise, I'm sure you did something.
She did.
There you go. See, but regardless, all those efforts.
She carried almost everything else. Let's be honest. I mean, while we're doing this,
We're greatly appreciated. I agree that I think the bigger lift on this is going to be more the guidelines if the HUD is approved. And so if there's any set of guidelines that every member should give their full set of eyes to, it's this set. Now, we've got other HODs that obviously they're much more localized or much more a limited focus. This is a very new creature. So as we move forward, if this becomes a historic overlay district, those guidelines are going to be critical to help us when applications come in. Else we're going to be struggling and getting into the dreadful situations I think that Kay and others are obviously concerned about. And again, I recognize that even if we make it one, that doesn't guarantee preservation. But I think it's a good step in the right direction. I'm going to pivot this right into that conversation.
Okay.
Because
Sure.
My principal concern as the chairman right now is the conducting of that meeting. And in particular, the amount of time we afford to the members of the public who are in attendance who want to make comment, not ask questions and interrogate, but make comment on the application, as well as how do we present letters of support that may have been provided, letters of dissent that might have been provided. All that information, I want to make sure it's all available to all of the ARB members in a manner that makes sense and shows that we're operating our process with absolute integrity. That's my biggest concern right here, is that and I think the meeting we had last month involving the Reston application showed that we need some help, because Denise is only one person, and managing the technology and having to be able to control speaking time, as well as being able to bring people to a right to be able to talk, whatever support the county and DPD can bring to that meeting is going to be very helpful. Because normally we don't have contentious meetings. They're pretty easygoing, I would say, with maybe some sparring back and forth with an applicant, but nothing so dramatic as what I think could be a high amount of public comment, which rightfully so. It's 400 and something odd, 492 homes, I believe.
So thank you. That was part two of my presentation discussion tonight. Denise and I talked about it at length yesterday for about 40 minutes, I think, just on this. But what we talked about is there has been some experience in DPD, and I've attended a couple community meetings where we've run, I think the Wellington one had 50. I've been to another one that had 100. So there's ways that we've figured out how to manage large amounts of public at meetings and getting them the opportunity to speak. So what we've kind of settled with is that we need at least 3 staff in addition to myself being able to go during the presentation. So Denise will be here. She'll be host doing what she normally does. Grace will be, and Grace doesn't know this yet, but she'll be helping with the chat and getting questions and queuing people up. And then we're going to ask at least for one more DPD member to come and do the timer because of the fact that we need somebody basically sitting there. I don't know if any of you all remember Linda's red, yellow, green light, but you know, like literally having somebody say 3 minutes up, done, like summarize your thoughts. And we didn't feel it was appropriate for the A or B members to do that because we want to make sure all of you are in tune with what's going on, and that we just felt like it would be, we can ask, and we've done this in the past, asked any DPD staff if they want additional comp time, and they can get comp time for coming to the meeting. So we'll have at least 4 staff there, including myself, so that we are handling all the virtual aspects of the meeting. So if there is a big crowd, we have methods of, you know, typing in the chat if you'd like to speak. We can go to the panelists, you know, and the participants and unmute them and give time. We can unmute everybody, you know, just to make sure we get everybody the opportunity to afford everyone the opportunity to speak that would like to speak. The other thing, and Jason, we talked about this in July of last year as we were gearing up to go in September and an in-person meeting, which thank God that didn't happen for Holland Hills, but that we need to make a motion. I think it was at the meeting before, so it'd probably be tonight, about limiting the amount of time per person at the next per person of the public at the next meeting. So motion, I think we made a motion of 3 minutes at the last one to kind of try to limit people's time.
The motion that was made at the beginning of these meetings not be adequate? I make one every
It could be.
meeting.
It could be, and then it puts everybody on notice. I think that's fine. I think last time, like I said, we were trying to figure out how to navigate that, and we were just like, well, let's just make it now so we can start advertising it out as well to the public. But we can say that, we can give that guidance. And
I mean, I absolutely would entertain a motion if we want to set a time limit. I don't know if people feel 3 is adequate or if we should offer more. And I will just make the follow-up motion during the kickoff to the meeting. But if the members want to suggest something that I would set at that meeting, I'm fine with that too. 3 minutes seemed to work well with Reston, but it was a number that was put in front of me.
Yeah.
Planning Commission.
Isn't the Board of Supervisors 3 minutes or 5 minutes if you represent an organization?
I believe so, John, and I think that's where we got that number from. Was it was 3 and 5 for Planning
follow
Commission
county
and
policy.
board.
Nobody can argue with it.
And I can't remember what the distinction was, but I think it's like if you're a member of an HOA or civic association or something like that, you get additional time. It's discretionary too, right? So if they have 3 minutes and, you know, we want, you know, Chris, you want to let them finish their thought, you know, we can do that. Denise, I'm wondering too, now that I'm thinking about it, if WebEx has some sort of timer capability, but I'm not sure. And
I've not seen that, but I'll look into it.
I suggested there actually are several websites that just display a timer that you can show on a screen. We do that for trainings and other meetings that I've dealt with in the federal circle. But I did like the idea of having something, or if you all are going to have a staff person do that, perhaps giving them a warning if we're, you know, a heads up, because last meeting, obviously, I didn't want to cut that gentleman off in the middle of his sentence. I didn't feel, I would rather he finish his sentence and then move on.
Sure.
And thankfully, everybody was very courteous. But one of the other things that worry about me is then those folks sat in the attendees list with live mics. And thankfully, everyone was very gracious and very polite for our commenters. But, you know, I want to make sure we've got that well locked down in the sense that if someone's got a comment, they get the chance to be heard and not interrupted by anyone else, you know.
That'll be my job, Chris. I'll be moving people out of presenter and into attendee, or muting people. That's my role.
Okay.
in community meetings we've had in the past, Chris, and I was trying, Denise and I were talking about this yesterday, is I was going to pull up a community meeting we had where we had 50 to 100 people or whatever at it and how we managed that. But it was a raising of the hand function that we have in WebEx. It was typing in the chat. It was us going through the attendees list, unmuting them 10 seconds or whatever have you, to try to make sure we have the most opportune amount of people to give people access to speak, because that's really the important part is, right, we want to make sure that everybody that wants to speak has an opportunity to speak as well. So I'll see if I can dig up the example of that, and then hopefully it'll make everyone a little bit more comfortable with A or B. I can send it to you as well, and you can, or have Denise send it to you, and then you can see kind of how we handled those meetings to make you a little bit more comfortable.
That's great. And I really appreciate, Laura, you, Denise, and all the other county support we're going to get for it. I just want to make sure it's run really well and really effective, particularly because it's going to be done digitally, which is not, ideally, you'd want, as you said, with Linda, we had the little timer with the lights. It was very easy to work with that because everyone was right in front of each other. It's not as easy here. On the other topic, though, I think, and I talked with Denise about this, is if someone does not wish to speak but wants to submit comments on this, how are those being collected and how will they get to us before the meeting so that we have time to actually review them and see them? Because I think I'm going to take something out of Elisa's hat here and say, I don't want to get those the day before and have to page through them. And I don't feel like that's giving short shrift to someone else too. So we need a cutoff time that allows processing and then submission to us.
Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, and I didn't get a chance to look this up today.
Yeah.
In our old motion from July, I think we had, you can submit comment. We had the motion, I can look it up specifically, but it was something about you can submit comment up into the day before or something like that. The only thing Denise and I talked about yesterday regarding that, though, was how to get those comments and have, and have those submitted. So Denise and I talked about, just putting on notice on the on the ARB website that if you're coming to this meeting, putting, coming to this meeting and speaking on Holland Hills, or would like to submit comment on Holland Hills, unfortunately, to email it to Denise, because we really don't have a method, and we don't have an ARB mailbox, or anything like that we can get comments. So really, it's Denise or myself, and I'm happy to field those too, but to get those comments to you. So if we want to pick a time, if you want it, 24 hours before 6:30 on February 9th to submit comment for the ARB to consider, that doesn't mean they can't come and read their comments. They do that at the board sometimes as they submit comment and then come and read their same comment, but in person. But any thoughts on that? We've kind of left that open.
Yeah, I mean, my thought might be a little bit earlier than that, but that's me personally. I mean, so the meeting's going to be on Thursday. Maybe if we said, trying to give them as much time as possible, but still give us some time to review those comments, maybe something like Monday at 6:30, that gives us like 72 hours to then review comments. And I think that would be, I think that might be beneficial to us. I think people who then submit comments in writing might actually believe that we've looked at them, instead if it were 24 hours before, we might not have, and then more people might feel compelled in that 24-hour circumstance to speak at the actual virtual meeting as opposed to just relying on their written comments. So that might be a good compromise, to get written comments, give us time to review it. It may even then minimize how many people are speaking at the meeting, although that may be
I agree wholeheartedly with Jason. I was hoping for a little more. I think that's a much more reasonable amount of time. I also suggested, and I've seen this in other meetings I've been in, making it that a person can indicate that they do desire to speak at the meeting, so that we would have a list of folks that already asked. Because I also worry about missing someone. And I saw this happen at the Reston Task Force, that someone was on the docket to speak, and they literally forgot about the poor gentleman, and they realized at the end of the meeting that they hadn't let him talk. And obviously he was okay, he spoke at the next meeting, but I'd rather, if there's someone who's like, I want to talk, well, let's just have your name on a list so we know, so I can even call you, so we don't even have to worry about the eccentricities of WebEx. But that's my opinion there.
I don't disagree with that. The only concern I have is the the Planning Commission and the board has staff that take all these comments and pull them all together and take meeting minutes and put this together. And the other thing about establishing a precedent for every meeting moving forward, having an opportunity to submit comments. Denise and I kind of agreed, do we just, leave it as is at this point, have them, give them guidance to submit comments the Monday before at 6:30. And I have to say, in the public meetings I've had, I've had one instance where someone said they were not able to speak or be able to be heard. We give ample opportunity multiple times, to call in if you have trouble speaking, calling, WebEx. The other thing the staff member will do would be troubleshooting people with WebEx. If we get any concerns from that, helping people onboarding and things. It's just, there's a double standard here of, how much do we just let it be organic and see how many people show up, or how much are we trying to control and anticipate it before? So, and we just don't know. We won't know. Even the night of, we won't know how many people will be coming, because then people can sign up at the hearing. Well, not sign up. I'm thinking about Planning Commission, but they can still come. Denise and I have also talked about, kind of in the same vein, of limiting what goes on next month's agenda to try to make it specifically Holland Hills only, and or planning to have a separate meeting just for Holland Hills if we think it is going to be that controversial. So, it's of two minds, and I'm happy to kind of defer to the ARB's discretion on this, but trying to figure out, do we just set aside a meeting just for Holland Hills and call it a day and just deal with everything regarding Holland Hills on that meeting? Or do we go forward with the meeting on the 10th, and we can also defer decision to another night if we need to have more time? The only problem is, once again, we have a tight timeline. So we would only have about a week to be able to get a comment from the ARB in before it would go to the Planning Commission on the 22nd.
I'm inclined for us just to hold it on our own meeting, and perhaps if we're going to consider things to drop off the schedule, their presentations or potential workshop sessions that could potentially be rescheduled to a later date, because those take more time. But I'd rather not stymie an application or a consent item that's coming in. And obviously, I would want this to be the first application on the agenda, because folks are putting up their time on it, but
well, and we talked about that over the summer when we kind of skipped the August meeting. It was just a little bit more of a delay for someone to get their building permit or deck, and they just had to kind of understand that was the case. And usually, I don't think we had very many issues. They might not be happy with it, but it's up to, I don't know. Those are all the things Denise and I talked about, plus more yesterday. So we were trying to go through every scenario of how we could kind of accommodate this potentially controversial case.
so we don't.
Laura,
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
Laura, I was going to ask. I don't have as good of a pulse recently. I know some time has passed. Obviously, we were planning on dealing with this a while ago and got delayed. My thought is, based on where the emotions have been, that this will be controversial, and I think a lot of people would want their voice heard. Do you have any reason to believe that's not the case, or do you think that still is the case?
Well, the good news is we had the poll, so I think that gave each homeowner hopefully the individual voice that they wanted for the supervisor, and that's a supervisor tool, but it also kind of gauged public support. The other thing is that the ARB is one cog in this wheel. So if they really oppose it, I think it would be, and maybe John has some more insight than I do, but I think they would be more likely necessarily to go to the Planning Commission or the board, since we are not actually approving the historic overlay district. But that is my, I think after the poll, my sense was that everybody kind of in the neighborhood got their say, and there's still people that are going to disagree. But I think it would have been more contentious if we had it before the poll. if that makes sense. And that
Yep.
now I think I'm always going to have people that are not supportive of it. I think that's fine. But I think we've had this vote and it's a little bit clearer of a picture now. So that doesn't answer your question, but hopefully it gives you some better answer.
Yeah, I didn't even know if there was a way to answer that question. I mean, we'll find out next month. I think is probably the best answer. But I guess the only thing I would say, Chris, is I agree with you. I think my guess is a separate meeting if necessary. This is going to be a significant amount of time, and it should be. It's a big deal, and we should focus on it and make sure we do it correctly. But I think it's going to take some time.
We've had long meetings in the past, so I think we can endure. I guess for the sake of managing our time, are there any other members that have any other comments to give to Laura and Denise on this moving forward so that we can keep on our schedule for tonight? John, I think I saw you on mute, so I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to throw in.
I'm good.
Just if we could have some idea tonight, if you want to have it on the 10th to give Denise and I some guidance on whether or not to kind of move everything from the 10th, or would you like a separate meeting in February for this? Like on the 17th or something like that, so that we have, so we can advertise properly.
Well, having sat in on the community meeting where Laura and Supervisor Stark presented the results of the polls, it was kind of quiet. People had questions and all, but I did not experience in that meeting the level of angst and anxiety and passion that the work group meetings had. So it might be fairly quiet. Something else to think about too is if you hold it on a regularly scheduled meeting night, you don't have to do all the excess announcement of public meetings and all that kind of stuff. We might just assume that it's going to go relatively smoothly. It may be a long meeting, but I don't think it's going to be as contentious as some of the earlier meetings. I think the community's kind of ready to move on. That's my own personal assessment. So that's not that's John's vote, not 492 people.
Caveat, the caveat asterisk next to your name.
It
Yes.
sounds like Jason and John and I are all in support of just maintaining meeting as is. Is there anyone else that wants? I see heads nodding. So let's just stick with what we've got. Let's keep the meeting at the schedule we have. I think no presentations from other county groups and stuff wanting to show us something fun and neat. I don't want to punish them for sitting in and having to endure a long meeting and then not even get to present. So let's make sure we have as thin of an other agenda as possible so we can prioritize the things we have to. And I'm going to adhere directly to the consideration of application lines and the bylaws. I've got that pulled up on my screen to walk through that. So we'll go through that line by line as appropriate. I didn't realize, we could always request a site visit. So maybe we need a Fairfax County bus to take us out there, so we can do a tour, a private house tour or something.
I tried to get tickets to that. It didn't happen. No, just kidding. But
Kay took the tour this year.
I know Kay took the tour. No, I bowed out because I did not want to appear partial. But I think the key is to Chris that if our saving grace is that we do have another week. So if for whatever reason we need to defer decision, if something goes haywire, we have a little bit of time. But that I know it's asking a lot for 2 meetings, but if you could just kind of pencil in the 17th as the next Thursday, if something goes wrong, we just don't have a lot of time, or
well, that's helpful to know too, that if we have that on our agendas as a potential, if we decide to in any way defer our vote, we could hold a special meeting on the 17th to discuss it. All right. That's good to know that is in our ability in our discretion.
We just have to advertise 3 days ahead of time, which we'll just have to advertise the Friday before. We can do it. It's going to be tight, and we prefer not to be completely honest with you. But we do have that capability, and we could potentially do it on the 24th as well, because the board hearing is not until March 8th. We'll miss the Planning Commission hearing, but we could potentially do the board. But just wanted to throw that out there in case everything goes south and we need to have further discussion. So
Thanks,
Well,
Laura.
that raises a further question in my mind. Do we need to consider making a presentation at the Planning Commission and or the Board of Supervisors meetings when these are considered? And do we have any
It's,
standing to do that, or role or
Well,
responsibility
I
to do
feel
that?
our recommendation will stand as presented. I mean, I guess the question would be if we felt it was necessary to send a representative, likely me, I suspect, to go speak at that to indicate our support. I know at each of those there's a chance for that.
I think you're right, Chris, that our recommendation would stand unless we don't make the recommendation before PC. So, I mean,
That's a
it
bigger
would
part.
help. Well, yeah, there's, but I think it would help. And I think it's always nice to have allies at staff hearings. That's my personal comment, but your discretion, of course.
I'm definitely willing to take that up at the meeting when we have our vote on the recommendation.
Okay.
Will be more reflective of how I'm able to do that based on what my world is like following the birth of our child later this month. So.
Ooh.
Ah.
And you can call in. You can call in still, Chris, to the board and the PC. So.
Should I have my kid on the phone crying so I can?
Sure.
That seems to
Or
be
you can do video testimony. You can do video testimony. They've done that too. So.
The cute factor always
cute
works.
factor.
That's what I did with Michelle. That's how I got this through. No, I'm kidding. I brought Michelle to some of the work group meetings to distract. But yes.
All right. Thank you, ladies, for all that prep on that. I'm sure we'll be more than prepared. Seeing I don't think anyone else has any more comments, let's move onward with our agenda. We have a presentation from Fairfax County staff with the Department of Planning and Development and Land Development. This is regarding a project called Parking Reimagined, and Denise reached out to me and asked if we might want to see a brief presentation on this. And since we obviously do have an interest in sometimes in how parking affects historic properties, I thought it'd be helpful for us to see that. I believe we have a collection of potential presenters. I'm not quite sure. I think we have William Mayland, I believe. There he is. I see him. Among many potential others. So
I think Mike Davis with Land Development Services is going to be leading the discussion. So.
Oh, there you go. Mike's already taken over the screen.
Hey there. Let me see if I can get video. Hold on.
We see it, Mike. I see it at least.
Okay.
Yeah, we see the presentation.
So I'll go ahead and introduce myself and the team. My name's Michael Davis. I'm with Land Development Services in Fairfax County, and we are working with the Department of Planning and Development on an initiative called Parking Reimagined, where we are taking a holistic look at the Article 6 in the zoning ordinance, which contains the parking regulations for Fairfax County. And it's a project that we have been working on since August of last year. We've been doing a lot of public outreach on the project over the last several months. And we're also beginning to look at specific recommendations and so forth with the consultant that we've hired, which is Clarion Nelson Nygaard. Some of you may be familiar with Clarion. They were the lead consultant on the ZMOD project, and Nelson Nygaard was their subcontractor. But Nelson Nygaard is doing the lion's share of the work on the project as a transportation and parking expert firm. So I'll go ahead and start the presentation. And I meant to, didn't mean to neglect Bill Mayland, who's my counterpart in DPD, who is the project lead for that agency. And also Austin Gastrell is working with us on this project, handling a lot of the technical elements as well as research and and just all around input on the project. So the three of us are happy to answer any questions that you have after the presentation. An examination of our off-street auto parking regulations in the county zoning ordinance is long overdue. As will be described in our staff presentation, technology and other factors have changed auto parking demand, and the parking that is supplied for this should adapt to these changes. Parking should not be a given, but instead should be considered a land resource that competes with other values when land is developed. The project is in its initial stages of engagement, and staff is seeking your input and perspectives on parking. This feedback is essential in our examination of parking and developing our project priorities. Your comments and conversations tonight will provide important background for the project. Let's see if I can advance the screen.
Cursor in the lower left-hand corner, and you'll see the arrows.
Yeah, I have the arrows, and I'm hitting the arrow, but it won't.
Try using your arrow button on the computer, on the laptop.
Would that be the four arrows at the bottom?
Yes, yeah.
Or bottom right?
Yes. Try
Yeah,
that.
I've done that, but I can't make it move.
Okay. I'm happy to share my screen if we want to do that.
Yeah, why don't we do that, and I can just
Okay.
tell you to advance to the next slide.
Yeah, that's no problem. Okay,
Thank you. I'm
you
sorry.
have to, that's okay. You have to stop sharing your screen.
All right.
The very top, if you hover over there, a little drop down thing will show up, and then on the far left will be, there you go. Okay. Oh. Give me a minute, I needed to become the presenter. Not that one. Here we go.
You can advance to the next slide.
Look good?
Yes, thank you. And now I have video. My PowerPoint screen was covering everything up, and I was just like, ah. So apologies for the glitches. I'll go ahead and restart. Most people own one or more vehicles and take for granted that they will be able to park these vehicles in their travels. Most of the time, people don't generally think about parking unless they can't find a convenient spot or there's an unexpected number of vehicles parked near their home. Yet parking is everywhere around us. Most every land use in the county requires some parking. When people drive and park, they're focused on finding a convenient space. They don't often notice the gray, empty edges that rarely have any vehicles parked there. A key purpose of our project is to have people think about parking a little differently, to begin to think of it as a resource. And when you do that, you begin to consider the importance of that resource relative to other important elements that we all care about, such as the environment, affordability, and land design. When parking has a community value, then you can think about how that value should be weighed against other initiatives. Parking is a land use, just like residences, office buildings, and shopping centers. This project intends to imagine how best to utilize that land resource. Next slide, please. While the county is moving toward multimodal development that encourages more transportation options such as walking, biking, and transit, driving is and will remain a common activity. This, of course, will require us to park these vehicles. Therefore, providing parking with land use activities will still be necessary. This project recognizes that parking will continue to be supplied. However, it's important that parking be sized to the average demand for it. The term that was created for this is right-sizing parking, which is to not underbuild or overbuild parking supply for a land use. While we strive to right-size parking and requirements, we also know there are places and uses that present parking challenges. This project will take in that information and look for ways to address those areas. Next slide, please. Here I'll provide background information on some elements of parking that hopefully give some insight on the operation of and influences on parking and the role these play in considering changes to the requirements. Parking has times of high and low demand. This can occur by the hour, day, month, or year. People know that during the holiday season, more people are out shopping, and this increases parking demand. In January and February, less people are shopping, and parking is freely available. While there can be times when it is difficult to find a parking space, parking should be constructed to address average demand. Within the county, there are places where you need a car for almost any activity beyond your home, and there are places where there are options that don't require a car. Character and location of a site can influence parking demand. In urbanized and higher density transit-oriented areas, options that allow less reliance on a personal vehicle are available. It can even be possible to be car-free. This lowers the need for a dedicated parking area. Also, there are development areas known as mixed use that contain residences, places of work, shopping, and entertainment options. These types of combined uses can reduce the need for vehicle ownership for people who live or work there. Because the mixed use area has these closely located options, residents or employees can walk or bike. As one potential result, residents in these areas may decide to own only one vehicle instead of two, which reduces overall parking demand. Because parking is a resource, it can be operated to enhance its value. An example of this is shared parking. Rather than building the minimum required parking for an apartment building, an office building, and a retail center located on the same site, the demand for each of those uses can be studied, and a smaller parking area can be built that provides enough parking for all these uses based on hourly demand. Looking now and toward the future, parking demand is changing with technology and people's behavior. Everyone's familiar with online ordering and home delivery of pretty much anything. This reduces parking demand when you don't have to go out to shop or eat. Also, even before COVID, remote working was growing annually. As we transition away from COVID, remote working is expected to continue to occur. These trends and other technologies to come will continue to influence the need for parking. Next slide, please. Parking areas should be considered a resource to the entire community. It's land area that we have made a choice to use as parking. It could have been used for something else. When we consider development of land, there are many elements that can be weighed, such as the environment, site design, and affordability. These are balanced with the need to provide parking, and sometimes the parking itself creates a need to address its effects, like stormwater runoff. Many times the parking requirements for a site control how a site can be used. Questions we're asking with this project are the extent of parking's role in land use. How much parking do we really need? What are the trade-offs for less or more parking on a site? Where can we balance parking supply with other site use possibilities that will provide a community benefit? Next slide, please. We want people to begin to think about priorities related to parking. Should a large amount of convenient parking be the ideal? Or can we think about balancing car parking against other desirable features like a quality urban streetscape that is inviting to safely walk and bike, or more open green space to enjoy cooling shade? Perhaps this gray slate could be redeveloped to trade a low-performing asset into a project that will generate added tax revenue to the county that can be applied to achieving our values. Next slide, please. Every change has a consequence. If we are to look at a current problem with parking supply, how could we address it? Adding more parking is a solution, but what effect might that have? In any land use option, parking becomes part of a cost-benefit decision. What are the ideals we should be considering when making these decisions? Looking at the photo in the slide, if we wanted to add more parking to address the high demand depicted here, do we want to remove those trees in the background to add it? Or would having those trees be important enough to tolerate this amount of parking demand for a few hours a day? These are among the questions we would like you to think about as you listen to and view our presentation tonight. Next slide, please. Community engagement is a critical element of this project. We're seeking meaningful feedback from all elements of the community who have personal experiences and thoughts about parking. But the community also includes business owners and tenants, land developers, nonprofit organizations, and religious assembly groups. Our engagement on this project will include those folks as well. The project will last about 12 to 18 months. During this time, we will gather community feedback in 2 distinct stages, but always be open to receiving information and discussion. The first step is starting with our engagement to the community and getting feedback from them. The second will be when we take that feedback and develop proposals for consideration. This will occur about halfway through the project lifetime. Next slide, please. This project will focus on off-street parking and loading. We have 3 basic goals for the project: adding best practices and promising new ideas to operate parking now and in the future, increasing clarity and flexibility in the administrative language of the ordinance, which includes looking more at the context of a site or area to determine its parking needs, and streamlining parking review and approval, which includes increasing predictability of review processes, times, and outcomes. Next slide, please. The parking requirements in the zoning ordinance haven't changed a lot since 1988. When considering that, think for a moment how much has changed from a world where the internet and smartphones were not available for entertainment and business. We've teamed up with Clarion Associates and Nelson Nygaard, 2 consulting firms that have extensive background in this effort to help us with the project. Together, we will pursue these primary activities: community engagement and feedback, examination and evaluation of best practices for parking, which includes getting information from regional and national municipalities on their programs, and administration of parking to see how they can apply here, evaluation of our own requirements to see where adjustments can be proposed and best practices applied, and ultimately, proposals for modification to the zoning ordinance will be developed for the Community Planning Commission and board consideration. Next slide, please. Our consultants will provide valuable information on the operation and dynamics of parking from a national and regional perspective that can have application here in the county. They will analyze and identify current and future trends that will guide our recommendations. They'll also identify strategic approaches to consider when thinking about the provision of parking, looking at flexibility and context to help determine rates and requirements. Next slide, please. We've begun the first steps in this project. We've been getting feedback from other jurisdictions, both regionally and nationally, on the operation of their parking regulations and best practices. And we intend to use that information to develop our proposals. Also, we're engaged in community town halls and more specific discussions with county committees and other focus groups to gain background and perspectives on parking here in the county. As we proceed, we will continue to get critical input from all these sources of information as we now begin to develop proposed changes to the ordinance. Once we have a proposal, then we will come back to the community to get their feedback. Then we will complete our proposal for final consideration. Next slide, please. We have a project website that will be continually updated with information and opportunities to participate in the Parking Reimagined project. In closing, we'd like to thank you once again for your interest in this project and look forward to hearing about your perspectives and experiences regarding off-street parking in the county. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Michael and William. And I guess I'll just preface this with, obviously, as we all know, historic preservation, historic properties frequently don't always jive well with parking changes. So I thought it would be beneficial if we got a chance to share our thoughts with them and any observations we might have. So I'll just, Michelle, I'm sorry, if you want, I don't have to throw you up front, but I always go to you first because I go alphabetical. But if you've got any observations and suggestions and questions, feel free.
Well, really, I live in a community. It's not a historic community, but it is right next to Mount Vernon, the estate. There is no official off-street parking where I live. In fact, all of the residences are required to have a looped driveway. So you park your car. If you don't have a garage, you park your car in your driveway because there isn't street parking. We're also so far away from any kind of mass transit. I mean, it would take, I don't know how far I live from the nearest bus stop, but it's pretty far. I would never take the bus because it is so far away. So I just am curious for people who live in a situation like what I live in, and I think a lot of historic districts are like this, how how you envision the people that live there would benefit from this project, because they need their car to go anywhere. And they need to be able to park their car, even to go to the Purple Can over at Mr. Stork's office. I need to have a parking space to get over there. So I'm just I'm wondering about this whole project and how it would help someone like me, or maybe it's not designed to help someone like me.
Well, there are a critical element of the project is looking at the county as being very stratified in the sense of more of a geographic way. There are less dense, more rural areas of the county. There's sort of the suburban areas that have a little bit higher density. And then there are areas like Tyson's and Reston where there's a lot of density in those areas. So one of the things that we're studying as part of the project is, potentially looking at the context of these various areas and seeing where having parking reductions and having more parking flexibility is going to be more workable. If people that are living in lower density areas do tend to be more car reliant because of what you had outlined, lack of transit availability, even sidewalks sometimes are not found in these lower density areas. So it's difficult to use other modes of transportation other than a personal vehicle. So, we recognize that as part of this project. And as we think through and get feedback from the community, we're seeing that there could be a stratification in our approach on making changes to the parking ordinance that would focus bigger changes on the higher density areas and less changes on the lower density areas in the county.
I'd also like to mention that kind of this project looks at redevelopment and new development. So this isn't, retrofitting existing parking because we changed the ordinance. This is when a shopping mall along Richmond Highway decides they want to redevelop, how are we going to look at the parking rate at that point? So we understand that Fairfax County, and especially lower density areas, that car dependency is not going to go away. This isn't hey, everyone needs to take mass transit all the time, or that we're not going to use cars. We understand that. So looking into the future, it's more of how can we kind of look at innovation for new uses, and how can we look at right sizing rates to make sure that the rates we had in 88, are they current, are they right now, or how can we update those rates to more better fit the current environment in the county.
Thanks. John, I saw John and I saw Joe's hands come up, so whichever one you want to go.
Are you going alphabetical or?
I think I was going to go alphabetical, but
Okay.
Joe seemed to he jumped at the gun, but I'll let you go, John.
Okay. Sorry, Joe. One thing that occurred to me in looking at your presentation, I'm an architect, so I get half of my information graphically, is it appears as though from your presentation that this only applies to on-grade parking lots. I did see the JCPenney parking garage in the background of the photograph of Springfield Mall, but I hope that you're looking at more than on-grade parking. And so right now, I think that your graphic presentation, despite whatever you said verbally, is very oriented to on-grade parking, and I think that's a limitation. And to follow up on what Michelle said, yeah, I think that you have to recognize that the county for decades has promoted diverse emphasis on automobile usage to get around. And I think hand in hand with this, if you're going to change parking and the behaviors to reduce the need for parking, you're going to have to put an equal amount of emphasis on sidewalks, bike paths, bus routes. I mean, I live in a part of the county where my bus route that took me right into downtown DC was eliminated in the pandemic. And so, in fact, bus service since I have moved to my house has steadily diminished over time. And if your emphasis is on getting people out of cars and using more public transit, you have to increase the public transit or it won't work. So that part of your presentation I thought was lacking. I think that you need to put more emphasis on, if we're going to have less parking, this is how we're going to accomplish it. And, you know, sidewalks, bike paths, increased public transit and such is really tough. And Michelle, I think the bus route closest to you that would take you into where you used to work was called the 11Z bus, or excuse me, the 11Y bus. And Metro, in its infinite wisdom, decided to eliminate it. So, yeah, so I feel your pain.
Well, thanks for your comments. Just to clarify on the question of the parking photos used in the presentation, what we're looking at is off-street parking holistically. So from that point of view, it would include parking garages, it would include surface parking, but it's parking provided generally privately with developments in the county. So it's not we're not looking at on-street parking, which is controlled by FCDOT primarily, except if it's a private street. So I just wanted to be clear that that was the scope of our project. And then I agree with the criticality of multimodalism and parking. You know, having those facilities available and easy to access are going to be more critical in being able to potentially lower parking supply in areas of the county. So I shared the perspective that multimodalism and beefing up our options for modes of transportation is critical, as well as designing communities that facilitate things such as walking and biking.
I'd also make the point that the comment regarding access to public transportation has been the most common comment that we've gotten throughout this project. We've had 8 town hall meetings, and I believe in almost every town hall meeting we've had with different district supervisors' offices, that comment has come up that the issue lies in, you know, access to public transportation. So we're aware of that and look forward to trying to kind of help that process.
All right, Ms. Swan.
I don't have comments.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Kolinsky.
Yeah, I'm just curious, with all the changes in technology and the way people are living, obviously some of these things pandemic induced change people's thinking. I'm just really curious to see how this all plays out. I'd love, looking forward to seeing the results of this and see what new ways of thinking and uses that we can come up with that can change us, hopefully for the better. So thanks, guys. Thanks for doing it.
Ms. Murray.
I don't really have any comments. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have so I can react to it in the future.
All right, Ms. Orr.
I just hope that you aren't making parking spaces smaller and drives smaller, because it's, we've all been in those parking lots that are just so tight that they're really uncomfortable. And I kind of try to avoid those parking areas, and I'm sure that the retailers would not be happy to hear that. But an aside.
Thanks, Kay. Mr. Plumpy.
Sure thing. Miss Orr, your solution is to buy a Mini Cooper. That's all I can say with that. But what I was going to say is that you kind of, for the presenters themselves, is well, first of all, I'm the landscape architect on the board. That this is home. This is a sweet spot for me. We deal with a lot of site planning and so forth, and in a lot of jurisdictions around the DC area. I mean, take note of. I'm sure if you already looked at Arlington, has a very strict code that will have parking reductions in the density areas, as opposed to, areas where it's less dense. So, less parking, less construction of bigger parking garages, asphalt paving, and so forth. So therefore, we're trying to preserve the environment to some degree and to make more green streets, such as in DC. Fairfax County does not have a green street program yet. I'd love to see it happen. So what I was going to propose to you, we worked on the Lorton Arts Foundation site many years ago. Storm management is a key thing in the county, as you know. And somehow, if you can not just worry about decreasing the amount of parking requirements, if, as Miss Audrey mentioned, and I'm in the same situation, I live out in the boonies in Fairfax County, Western Fairfax County, and I need a car without question. Now, granted, I don't have a Tesla yet, but I can go zero neutral carbon here shortly, if I did. But the big thing here is amount of asphalt cover and so forth. And if we did a little bit smarter planning on incorporating green practices within the parking lots themselves, it'd be more hospitable instead of that JCPenney parking lot photograph, meaning storm management, infiltration, pervious paving in some areas where it can happen, more shade trees. I know the county has a strict tree cover policy now on the newer developments, which is great. It's a matter of really mixing all those kit parts together so that you have the once barren asphalt parking lots, make it a little bit more greener, a little bit more hospitable, and it will. And I think you're going to see that the only time a suburban parking lot mall is needed with all the parking spaces is on the day after Thanksgiving when they do all the shopping. Other days it's probably 40% full. The rest is always empty asphalt. Incidentally, just last thing I'll share, in Arlington County, I've worked on a lot of developments in the Boston Clarendon corridor, and essentially they found out that the requirements of having certain parking garages of certain number of spaces per square footage of residential or office, it's way overbuilt. They say that right now today it's probably less than 50% use the parking in the parking garages themselves. So it's well overbuilt. Granted, these buildings were built in the early 2000s and so forth, but a lot of people take mass transit. So when you get to those urban areas, I know you're thinking just like they are. So I think we're having a better result when it's all said and done. So keep up the good work. Again, think green, think less, but we'll get more in the long run. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you, Joe. Mr. Zellman.
Nothing really to add that anyone else hasn't said. Just excited to learn more and see how it evolves. Thank you.
All right, and I think the 10 cents I'll throw in is obviously being a resident of Reston. I, unlike some of my colleagues, I have a bus stop right outside my house, just a short walk away. So it's the convenience is well there. But what I've learned on being on the comp plan task force for Reston is that those things have to be well thought for. And that if they're, and as well, in addition to that, if you're talking about new development, a developer is going to do exactly the minimum required. They are not going to do any more than that. So if we are going to try to innovate parking in the county, the minimum has to be raised to be a higher standard then. Or there has to be incentives for building to a higher standard that would allow more flexibility in proposed development. I think we do have one HOD that I think has a severe parking opportunity, which is Lake Ann. The parking lot that abuts Lake Ann that's used for the farmers market and sits right, I believe it may abut the historic overlay district, maybe partially in it, is a potential opportunity for you using it successfully, but it's also a potential risk if it's not used successfully. If something was proposed there that was inappropriate, it would potentially mar and damage the historic properties involved. And so I think my 2 points would be, one, we need to raise the standard at what the bare minimum is, so that if someone's going to be proposing unique ideas, things like what Joe's talking about with stormwater management or impervious surfaces or more shade, those things need to be really, we need to catch the developer's attention. And it's not anything against the developer, but if you set a standard that says this is what you must do, I mean, they're going to do exactly what they must do. And if the county wants to innovate like this is kind of pushing for, I say ask for more innovation, and then let's see if it's how much long we can keep it in those suggestions before it has to get yanked out, as opposed to just hope. In that sense, that's my thought on it. Go ahead.
I was going to say thanks for thanks for that, and thanks for everyone's comments tonight. As we said, we're still in the midst of the project, so we'll probably be back to you guys when we have a proposal to present, and then that should hopefully get some more feedback. People like to react to something more specific in front of them, so it'll be good to come back and hear your perspectives after that.
Well, and I think I speak for all of us. We thank you for waiting through the meeting to present to us. Presentations always get the short end of the stick on that, but also the fact that you were willing to come. The ARB has not always had a strong track record with folks coming to present to us. So thank you for doing that in the first point, because we appreciate you seeking our input on it.
Thank you very much.
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave you to your evening. And with that, we will move on to board and staff items. So first item on the agenda for board and staff is review and action on approval of the previous month's minutes for December of 2021, as well as the paying of the recording secretary. Denise, did you receive any comments prior to the meeting on the minutes?
Ms. Aubrey commented that she had no comments.
All right. Are there any members that have any comments on the minutes that were provided? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move the adoption of the December 2021 minutes and payment to the recording secretary.
All right, we have a motion, seconded by Mr. Kolinsky. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? All those abstaining? All right, the motion passes. Live long and prosper. All right, treasurer's report.
Yes, so the December balance started with $21,146.81. You paid the clerk, and you also renewed your NAPC membership, leaving a balance beginning in January of $20,000. $20,446.70.
Any questions for Denise on that figure? All right, seeing none, let's move on to administrative. Staff reports, Denise. What do you got to tell us about the carrot that you guys keep dangling in front of us? Or Laura appeared.
Yes. Well, you had asked that this be put on the agenda this time, so it is on the agenda this time. And I brought it to Laura's attention yesterday. We had a pre-meeting meeting, so I'm going to let her speak to the staff reports.
Thanks, Denise. As y'all know, when we hired Nicole 2.5 years ago now, the main job of her position was to start the staff report process for the ARB staff reports. Other things have come up, obviously, with 2 historic overlay districts, and we are still understaffed. Oh, sorry, 3. I just forget. It's just so quickly. 3. Basically, right now, we're still understaffed. I'm not trying to go into all of our woes or excuses, but we have tried to hire a new planner 3 for a history commission. This is our 3rd run of the ad for the position. So we're just having a hard time hiring right now. Not that that's an excuse, we just don't have capacity to be able to do it with 2 historic overlay districts and 1 just finished. So, and basically Denise is running ARB and History Commission by herself. So applause to her. But we're still just understaffed. The position for the Planner 3 is actually open right now, and open until the 21st. So if you have anyone that's interested, please have them apply. But with that being said, that's a Planner 3 and not the Planner 2 that will hopefully eventually be supporting Denise. So after the Planner 3, that is next up in the queue. However, in talking with Denise and Grace today, it's not likely that we will be able to get that person on board due to county human resource issues and regulations and all sorts of things until probably summertime of this year. Just the amount of people to be hired and regulations and such, and getting that out there. So with that, it's not that we're ignoring it completely. We're having other measures that we're doing. If you get the DPD kind of newsletter, we're going to start online application of ARB cases and Plus at some point, which will be coming back to you at a later time once we kind of get under our belt a little bit more. And we are also creating a legacy database of all the ARB cases. Hopefully we can get to at least 2010. But we do not have an ARB case database right now, and that's part of this staff report effort that we're trying to get in place before we start the staff report. So although we do not have the position necessarily there are other items we're working towards to support that ARB staff report when we eventually get it rolling. Is that political enough for you?
Thanks, Laura. Are there any members have any questions for Laura about this one? All right, I think the main reason, obviously, I know obviously poor Denise is obviously overworked, and obviously I imagine most of you at DPD with the Heritage Program are overworked, but I think we wanted to continue to highlight this is a priority for the ARB membership, particularly if we do have many new overlay districts coming in. This is probably going to be the only way we're going to be able to navigate some of these. And I think, again, the Reston application last week was a stellar example from that, because Denise basically prepared an ad hoc staff report through a bunch of questions she got from several members that, you know, in the future, that would be fantastic if that was a more readily accessible thing. But I know I'm preaching to the choir, Laura, you've been around to hear that, but if you need us to say it like that so that you can tell someone else that we're saying that, that's why I'm doing it.
My number one priority now is to hire people. So for your benefit, for our benefit, for everyone's benefit, that's my goal. It's taking forever. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the Great Resignation and other things that are happening. So we are working on it. It's on our radar, and it is a top priority for us in 2022.
Thanks, Laura. Right, the next item on administrative is funding priorities, and I think, Denise, this is more meant to be in general ARB priorities and part of the spur of the topic of discussion that I brought up last meeting. We kind of had a long meeting, and so by the time we even got to this, everyone was pretty worn down, and so we kind of tabled it till this meeting. Principally, and I would not interpret it so much as funding, so much as the fact that the ARB obviously does occasionally indicate that we want to provide support to several initiatives, like, for example, the African American study that we held back the grant support for, cost share support for. And part of the reason I wanted to bring this discussion up is it's kind of a helpful indication to not just Denise, but to Laura and their superiors of what initiatives the ARB is finding important moving into 2022 and further on, so that when they bring them up in meetings and staff talks about providing funding to Heritage, they know what initiatives the ARB is interested in supporting. I know that's a little oblique way of talking about it, but I think if we don't talk about the things and we don't indicate that, it doesn't give as much strong support to Laura and Denise and others to get county support for those initiatives. And I'll kick that off and let everyone else talk by saying one of the first ones I think we should really prioritize that was only brought to my attention, you know, recently, is the Heritage Resource Management Plan, which I believe dates from 1989. And the fact that is that right, Denise, 89? Or is it younger than that?
It was adopted in 88.
88, excuse me, 88. So we have a heritage resource management plan that's older than our current guidelines that we're updating. And that is kind of the baseline that guides DPD and heritage on how they prioritize things. And it was developed in '88. And I think I'll take a page out of the parking folks and say a lot's changed since 1988. And it doesn't give any real recognition when you look at it to diverse varieties of properties, things like African American heritage, LBGQT, or just a level of focus that you would expect in a heritage document, because it was done in '88. And so if I were to prioritize one thing in my mind, it's us indicating to the county that if we're going to keep pushing for surveys or keep pushing for grants to help support initiatives or overlay districts, that other document needs to be brought back into the current century and not, lagging behind. But that's my big take on it. I wanted to hear everyone else's thoughts because I felt like it would be helpful for Denise as well as Laura to hear what we felt was an important priority. So we can go around, let everyone talk, or if folks have an observation, I've got all you on my screen, so you just put up your hands and we can handle it that way. Is there a preference? All right, Michelle, it's you.
Okay, this heritage management plan, what is it actually, how is it used? How's it supposed to be used? I saw a copy in a binder when I went to McKay's office, when McKay was just a lowly regular supervisor, not the head of the supervisors. But I don't know how they use it. And, so if somebody could explain that to me, and I, of course, think that something that's from that far back should be updated, presumably, so it will be used more. But if we keep pressing for needing new inventory work, is this document something that would help to get funding for additional survey work?
That's my understanding, Michelle, but I'd let Denise or Laura chime in on it.
Yes, so primarily now, I would say that the Heritage Resource Management Plan is used in development review when I specifically need to support an argument that I'm making for either preservation or but mostly documentation, but just recently, most recently, for preservation of a 1923 bungalow that came in Vienna that they were going to demolish. So it works well for that type of resource, but not so well for resources that are not identified. What it is a series of contexts that were written through the 1988 lens of what is significant to county's history. It does have a whole archaeology component, and I know that the archaeologists use their sections in development review as well. It supports our policy plan and the text that is actually integrated into the comprehensive plan for heritage resources.
So it seems to me a foundational document that, we keep bringing up, inventory efforts the county should do, or, information, and the fact that it is so woefully behind, it makes me feel like that's part of the reason, Michelle, why we're being so reactionary all the time, is that the county doesn't even have a good document to aid Denise and Laura and others in doing what they need to do. They need a new one. But that was kind of what I was trying to signify with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It could be more, though. I'll just say that.
It could be more.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that we would have a discussion about how that document could maybe shape our priorities moving forward, and the goals that we might set for ourselves as far as survey. Just our whole framework as a planning tool for DPD heritage resources.
So when a property is listed on the Virginia landmarks list, or it's listed on the National Register or determined eligible, or even just on the Fairfax inventory by the History Commission, is it automatically included then in that document? Or I mean, because the document, you would think it would have to be kind of a living document, not just something static that once it's written, you stick it on the shelf and that's it. Because I mean, if you're using it for review of a project that comes in, you're going to also have to look at all these other lists to see if there was anything else added in the intervening years, wouldn't you?
Yes, so it doesn't identify specific properties like the inventory of historic sites, Virginia landmarks. It identifies types. So it has a context that's written for a period, and it's mostly focused on periods rather than particular, let's say, ethnic groups.
Okay.
And then it identifies resource types that would be associated with those contexts.
So you're looking at all those other lists anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, that's where we fit. I start there, Michelle, and then if I'm looking for more support, then I go to the Heritage Resource Management Plan, because quite honestly, I don't find it a very useful document unless I'm looking for that extra support.
Right.
But it was board approved. I have that as well. So I have the board approved Heritage Resource Management Plan.
Well, it sounds like it's something that then should be updated to get into the current century.
Yes.
I think that's all I have to offer.
Thanks, Michelle. John?
Well, I've been on this board a long time, not quite as long as Elise, but I'm appalled that I don't have any recollection of this document. Can you share it with us? That would be my first thing, observation. And then it also occurred to me with some horror that if this document dates from 1988 and reflects 1988 values of Fairfax County, that this may be the document that various other agencies within the county are using as a means of ignoring potential heritage resources in all of their development, redevelopment, planning proposals. And maybe part of the root of why we're always chasing after something, saying, but don't, but don't, but don't. So yeah, by all means, I think this is something that maybe needs to be updated and looked at more carefully and brought to everyone's attention. So first thing I'd ask is, may we see it?
Yeah. So one of the first things that I did when we hired Kira is I asked Kira to retype the heritage, because it was physically in a binder, and OCR readers couldn't read it to translate it. So I would have to physically retype the information in it. So Kira retyped all of the historic preservation sections. She did not retype the archaeology sections. The archaeologists have their own retyped version, but yes, I can certainly send you the historic preservation, and I'll ask Liz if she would provide the archaeology sections.
Okay, so what you're telling me, this is probably a mimeograph?
Yes.
If anybody remembers that technology? And it is so old that OCR is going, huh, what? That tells you the significance of our lack of follow through, our lack of staying current, our lack of staying on top of things. I am horribly embarrassed at myself for not knowing more about this thing and being more appalled earlier on. But my apologies, gang. I didn't perceive it.
I was going to say, John, it's part of it is just us being more aware of some of the ins and outs that Heritage have to deal with, and we're constantly having to be reactionary. So don't shoulder all that burden. I mean, I remember Richard and Robert highlighting the issue with the guidelines alone and the fact that, it took a lot of lifts here. So that's kind of what I'm trying to pick up with is what's the next thing that we need to tackle now? Let's see. I believe it would go to Samantha. Any observations? You don't have to stick on this topic. It's more, I wanted to open up to any things that folks wanted to bring up.
I also have no comments, but I am all on board to studying it.
All right, Mr. Kalinsky, Steve.
Yeah, I see the big urgent need money to be spent is, and I know we just talked about this, is staff reports. I think that will really smooth things and give guidance not only to the applicants but to the members of the board too. Having all the stuff outlined. And so if we're going to push for money and put efforts, that's certainly where to go. With regards to any sort of documents and lists, they're all great unless they're ignored. So, if you found it in a binder and it was a mimeograph and I don't know, Denise, does it still have that funny smell to it? Or is that worn off by now? It's no good if nobody's accessing it. So, but what's there, hopefully, because we are talking about history here, is still valid information, but just supplementing it and bringing it up, adding to it, bringing it up to date with changes that have been made certainly would be great. But let's get on board with staff reports if we can.
Thanks, Steve. That takes us on to Elise.
It was done in 1988. The county had Wang word processors and copy machines. It's not mimeographed. There must be some issue with OCR and Wang word processor fonts. The project was done by the person who was then the staff prehistoric archaeologist. And it took a lot of her time. Her name was Sue Henry, by the way. And I think she's gotten married since. But it took a lot of Sue's time. So if we're going to do something like this, I think it would require hiring a consultant. Now, my next question is, I know people have worked on plans. So have they been working on the policy plan since then? Because I know that's been updated. I know something's been updated since 1988. Bruce Krivitsky was working on it and Linda Blank was working on it. So what is the relation? So why did they emphasize the policy plan? Is that more important than the Heritage Resources Plan?
So there is a policy plan. Yes, so there is a policy plan that is part of the comprehensive plan, and it has a section for historic resources, which is about 5 pages, and I'm happy to send that all to you as well. I was not here when they updated the policy plan, so I can't tell you the last time it was updated. That might be, however, Elise, what you're remembering. There are also sections in the comprehensive plan that deal with heritage resources. For instance, the Ruston Master Plan that Chris is working on with the task force. He's working to put heritage resources into that portion of the comprehensive plan. So I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to. It's probably the policy plan. Is it more important?
Yes, Denise, I'm talking about the policy plan.
Yes, yeah, and your question is the policy plan more important than the heritage resource management plan?
Right. Since the comp plan has been updated, but the heritage resources plan was not. Is it necessary to have a heritage resources plan? I'm just asking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think that the policy plan is really a, what do I want to say? It's not really a framework for how we prioritize our work. So the policy plan is more guidelines, broader guidelines for historic preservation, and you can take a look at it when I send it to you. It's more like, oh, okay. So it's more broader guidelines, where the Heritage Resource Management Plan is very, very specific. Where, like I said, it is a series of historic contexts and prehistoric contexts, and what resource types you might find in those contexts, and then it prioritizes what you might be looking for survey. So, for instance, survey, and then also preservation. So to use as a preservation tool. So I don't think that they're not really the same. You can't really compare them. I think for our work, having an updated Heritage Resource Management Plan means that I have a better sense of, I'm not being reactionary, and I have a better sense of my goals for the next 10 to 20 years. For the policy. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Well, the Heritage Resources Management Plan is more thematic and gives us like a broad sense of what we can tap into. It's kind of like Nan Netherton's red book. I call it the Red Book of Fairfax County, but the history of Fairfax County. But it gives us some framework of which we can say, you know, this is what we've identified as unique and significant in Fairfax County and that we need to be addressing. And the one from 1988, you know, is just not adequate. The policy plan and the comp plan and the zoning ordinance give us tools to be able to survey, do easements, that type of thing. Those are in the policy plan, the comp plan, and the zoning ordinance. But the Heritage Resources Management Plan basically says, we're going to focus, mid-century modern is a huge, there's just so much of the history that we haven't gotten to because it's 40 years old. So we get to the point where we say, we can't say, for example, part of the struggle in Reston is we can't say, you know, 1970, we have the trying to couch the argument of the 1970s are significant and important and now eligible for the National Register because we don't have that part of our county kind of in our Heritage Resources Management Plan. So it's just a vetted document of thematic elements. It's just very outdated. I very rarely use it because it just is so just not helpful for our work, and it would be really helpful to kind of bolster arguments moving forward for us to create those surveys, as Denise mentioned. So at a minimum.
Yeah, but I would also say the arguments, I think, are, again, put us on the defensive. You know, that arguments are for developers when we're sitting in that context and we're arguing for preservation. I guess I feel like the Heritage Resource Management Plan is our true planning tool for how we do preservation in the county. What we're saying is important. What resources we're saying. What themes, to use Laura's word, what thematic things we're saying shaped our county, and then what the built environment looks like and what's significant about that. So that it gives us all of those things.
Okay, I think if it's really important, it should be considered, but I also think it should be considered to be done by a contractor because you don't have the staff to do it. And when you get the staff, they'll be doing staff reports and supporting the History Commission. So this looks like, to me, an outside job. That's just my thought.
All the more reason for the county to get funding for it, right? Okay, thanks, Elise. Do you have any other things you wanted to bring up, or is that okay? Kay.
This is all new stuff for me. I don't know. So
That's all right.
I'll go with the group, whatever.
Joe.
Step reports. You know, I'm
Okay, excuse me, you're getting into my time, but that's okay.
Okay.
I'm going to say
I
that,
heard
hey,
staff reports there too from Kay.
we're okay. We're okay here. I think just get it done. Outside consultants, great. Ask traceries as get a proposal from them. I'm sure if they can't do it, they'll definitely tell you who they could refer to if you want to do that. I think it makes sense. And no other comments. Good luck with it.
Thanks, Joe. Jason?
I don't have anything to add. I like being last.
Well, see, but I technically get to be less, so I get a
That's
privilege
true.
since it's on too.
Yeah.
So, so I
Maybe it's
didn't
with
mean
a Z.
I didn't mean to make it about the Heritage Resource Management Plan, but when I started asking questions about things, this became apparent to me, John, when we always raise, well, countywide survey or modern survey. Well, this document could be half the justification for some of these efforts, and it stops at 1988. So, of course, it's not going to be highlighting the concerns that we're seeing now. So I kind of feel like it's the building block for every other thing we push for, in my mind, beyond staff reports. I think that's evidently clear. This and staff reports are key items that the ARB needs. It makes me think of integrated cultural resource management plans at the Army. And the reason I like those is I used them when I worked there to justify funding for other projects. And I feel like that would be the way I would want to see any new one highlight survey objectives for the county, because that's what I built when I did them in the Army. Because then I went back and said, I need money for this because we said we had it in the plan. And until I said that, no one in the Army cared.
So I have a question for Elise. Elise, do you happen to know Sue Henry's married name?
I do not recall it.
Okay, because I have this vague recollection in the back of my mind that she married a guy named John Renault.
She did.
She did. That's the same
This is
Sue?
Michelle, yes. And
Okay, she's
because
still around. She lives in
Well,
Alexandria.
Sue Henry used to work for the county before she came to work for the Park Service.
Okay.
And then when she worked for the Park Service is when she met John Renault and they got married.
And she was the county's historic archaeologist for maybe 7 years or so in the 80s.
Okay. So I don't know that she would be interested in updating her 1988 work.
Since then.
but that all of a sudden it was just like, wait a minute, I know that name. Okay. Sorry.
Years are probably burning
I
right
was
now.
pretty sure Michelle knew her, and I thought you were familiar with her as well.
Yeah, that just shows you how old I am.
And she's retired, She retired from the Park Service a number of years ago.
So she's got free time to come back and do it. Okay. Well, if there are any other discussion topics on that, hopefully Denise and Laura, we've given you a perspective on what our key priorities are to help you. And part of the reason I wanted to bring this up is because when the county does its budget stuff, if Denise and Laura and them know some of the things we're eyeing, then that gives them strength to go seek funding for it. And I think it's a pretty darn clear indication from us that staff reports and an update to this plan, if you're going to update the guidelines, then it sounds like this plan needs to be updated too. So unless you need to hear a motion from us, I feel like that's a clear indication of where our objectives lie right now. And who knows what February will bring though. All right, thank you everyone for
that my colleague Ann Stuntz is listening in. She sent me an email asking me about the plan, which I will answer soon.
All right. Well, I thank you everyone for entertaining that discussion. Let's try to get through the rest of our stuff and give ourselves our evening discussion, updates and reports. Holland Hills update. Do we need an update on this? You gave us a pretty extensive one, Laura. Okay. See everyone on February for that one. We'll get ready for that fun. Homes Run Acres HOD update.
Yeah. So just making sure I'm off mute. So Chris Daniel came and spoke to the work group in December, and I thought it was a really great discussion. They peppered him with questions, and he was able to really explain what the ARB will be looking for. They want assurances of certain type, but I'm not sure that we're able to give them those assurances. But it was I felt that it ended on a really good note that the Architecture Review Board always does try to get to yes. So that it's a conversation, that the design guidelines are there to guide, and they're not prescriptive per se. So it was, I thought it went really well. And I really do appreciate Chris being willing to come and talk to
kudos to my colleagues who are always there and participating with them. And I think Kay echoed one of the concerns in today's meeting about what was brought up there is that, in the end, someone can get to do what they want to do ultimately. And that even if you have a historic overlay district and the ARB, we might deny it, but they could still potentially get that approved through the Board of Supervisors. So obviously the other thing Elise pointed out to me is some of the more outspoken members who have some concerns were not there. So I got peppered with questions. I wouldn't call, they were softballs. I was expecting a few more tougher questions to come at me, but it was, again, thank you, Kay and Elise, because I think it's the two of you who are always on that one for all your efforts on that one and keeping that group going.
Yeah.
Samantha.
Sorry. Samantha. I didn't mean to forget you there, Samantha.
So, and thank you again. We're meeting once a month. We meet the third Wednesday of the month. I think we have a meeting next Wednesday. So we'll be talking about possible changes to the ordinance, to the zoning ordinance. They have been discussing further height restrictions, as we were just talking about with Holland Hills, and front yard coverage as well. So those two things will be on the agenda for next week.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah. Rezoning cases, unless there was any other comments on that one. Seeing any. Rezoning.
So rezoning, the only update that I have is we had a quick meeting with the project lead for the original Mount Vernon High School, and we're going to have a brief meeting with Joe Plumpy. They had something that they wanted to talk through, but they're not, the timing isn't right for them to bring it to workshop in February because they need an answer more quickly. Yes, Mr. Plumpy has his hand raised. Oh, no, he's just saying hi.
Thumbs
Okay,
up.
he's just
He's
saying
got
thumbs
it.
up. Okay,
All
yeah.
Thanks,
So
Joe.
the timing of that, though, has been, we had thought that they were going to come back to the ARB in March for approval. I think, in February for approval. I think they're going to push it back to March. But I appreciate Mr. Plumpy's support for that.
All right, any other questions on rezoning cases?
Yeah, just a comment, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Denise sent us the list of current rezonings, proposals, and such. One of which was for the Pendaw Community Business Center, and that is for Steve and Michelle. It's just north of Chuck E. Cheese and Walmart on Route 1 and south of Quandra Road. And the redevelopment proposal assumes that the revised comp plan for that part of the county will be fully implemented. And I had some questions, and Denise and I had a very constructive email exchange about that. And thank you, Denise, for answering my inquiries. But the one thing that concerned me was that when the county planning staff looked at a request from the developer to ignore the setback requirements and the buffer requirements in contiguous proximity to an adjacent parcel, also within the business center rezoning area. They said, yeah, it's okay, fine, because it's going to get redeveloped anyway. But in the meantime, it's not been redeveloped. It's still somebody's house. And it's somebody whose last name is Quander, a woman named Elizabeth Quander. It's a very significant name in the Mount Vernon district. And so for someone in the planning office to say, yeah, it's already been on the comp plan, prime for redevelopment, it doesn't matter if we require them to follow the setback or not. That struck me as a disservice to the person who currently owns that lot, and particularly since that is a very historic name in that part of the county. So I just wanted to bring that up to your attention, is that when Denise sends these things to us, sometimes it pays to look at them and see what it's actually in them, because that was something that troubled me. You know, the rest of this stuff was all things that we should have been paying attention to 5 years ago when they redid the comp plan for that part of the county. But this was one that had a direct impact on a property that's still there. And I was concerned about that, and I shared my concerns with Denise. So, but thank you for listening.
Thanks, John. And I think that, again, echoes that topic we brought up before about having a good heritage resource management plan. I feel like there's better guidance on the whole front on some of these things, because I wonder how much that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like there's a good baseline we need in the county to help Denise and others know what the priorities are regarding heritage resources, or even properties that could be heritage resources, you know. All right, any other rezoning case questions? Seeing none. Okay, section 106 reviews and cases.
So on my draft agenda, I moved the wolf trap management plan up to this section because that's really where it belonged. And I don't know whether Laura wants to speak to that or not. It's her case.
The only question I had is, I think at last month's meeting we talked through the wolf trap master plan effort, and that it was a section 106 and we were notified late. The current step they're on right now is a programmatic agreement. And just the question for the ARB was whether or not they would like to be a consulting party on this. And if so, then we will kind of enact our new policy on how to do that. But just the question was, I think they're doing an adequate job from staff's review. The ARB is welcome to become a consulting party, but at this stage, it was just if they wanted, if you all would like to become a consulting party on that, we would just need to notify the board, notify the county attorney, and do all that sort of policy piece. So,
observations from members?
I learned a lot by reading the materials you distributed to us that I never knew about wolf traps.
I know, it was very interesting.
Yeah, it was just like, what's this thing? Where's that? It's back. I've never been back in that part of the property. It was interesting to learn all that. But I think that it was a very thorough. It almost struck me as overkill in the thoroughness of it, and so I don't see any significant need for us to become involved as a consulting party.
Not seeing any other opinions going otherwise, I guess at this point. Oh, Michelle, sorry.
Well, I just would like to echo John's comment. You know, I think that the ARB needs to be selective in which projects it wants to become a consulting party on, not just any old 106 project that comes along the way. And if the Park Service is doing a fine job working with the state and the county, then let them go at it, and let's not get ourselves involved in this particular one.
All right. Sounds like I'm not seeing anyone else putting up their hands. Denise, Laura, it doesn't seem like we have an interest in this one. And with my professional hat, I'm always happy when a consulting party decides that this one is, they don't need to be involved, that they don't, if they choose to not because they feel like it's in good hands. It's always helpful. But I would always like to be notified though. But that's my only caveat on that.
that was the main, I think that was the main result of this, was we need to start talking about section 106 within the county again, and how it gets notified, who gets how we get notified, who gets notified, that type of thing. So we're still working on that.
Okay.
As long as we're talking about section 106, since the county has taken on consulting party review for One University Plaza, what are they doing? And how have they commented?
It's for, well, housing and community development is in charge of that project.
So are they keeping you guys informed?
Nope.
Delightful.
It is gone. Other than that, I mean, I drove by the other day, but other than that, I have
The building's gone or the
the
project
building's gone. The building's gone. Yes, the building's been gone for a while.
Yes, it's definitely gone.
Wow. Did they
Um,
do any mitigative documentation? Do we know?
Can I talk to you offline about that, John?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Fun. Okay. Any other 106 questions? And with that in mind, we have I've got a quick update that happened over the weekend but regarding Lake Ann. And I think it's a happy one as opposed to a offline conversation one. So as many of you saw, just recently there was an article in the Reston Now and the Patch about the potential proposal for a $300,000 plan to revitalize Lake Ann that Supervisor Alcorn is pushing. And that is focused on multiple levels of looking at how Lake Ann could potentially be looked at from an economic level, how can we get, more use there and other initiatives. And he, indicated an interest in obviously historic preservation being a primary factor in that. But the exciting news was that the Gupta Foundation, which was a group that reached out to me last year about our survey concerns that we highlighted with the initial structural assessment, they indicated an interest in potentially helping support that. Well, they came back to the supervisor and to me and indicated they just want to pay for it.
Wow.
And so I was on a meeting with the supervisor and the husband and wife that are representatives of the Gupta Foundation. I indicated that after talking to county staff, the county can accept gifts like that for particular initiatives. We as the ARB just pointed out the need and the deficiency, and we would be very happy to see that survey funded or that cursory study funded. And now the gears are rolling to coordinate with the right offices in the county to see if that can happen. And so as in exciting news, the hope means that we could get that survey done very soon. And the Gupta Foundation also wanted to see it done soon. And so it was a very, very fortuitous and wonderful opportunity. And I think I'll just piggyback on that to just steal the correspondence. The History Commission's letter definitely also helped. We have continued to highlight the issue here. So, when you speak out, someone hears. And so I'm hoping to hear positive news about that in the coming weeks. And so maybe we'll have the cursory study done and more information to share. Denise, anything else on that? Or I think that kind of hits all the points on that.
No, I do. Yeah, thank you.
With the revitalization study, I did tell the supervisor, please keep us in mind that we would like to be a part of that. I made that very clear in that conversation so that anything being done there is planned with the district in mind so that we don't get into a situation like we did with the Crescent where we're basically trying to find the best solution possible with a challenging development. All right. That's my good news. And then I already stole the one correspondence unless we want to talk any more about it. History Commission was really wonderful to send a support letter to Supervisor Alcorn regarding Lake Ann. We're always happy to have their support on that issue. And unless there's any questions on that one, we'll go right to their next letter or their next, yes, right?
Right, which was a response to a Section 106 Section 106 review that they became a consulting party on, but the county did not. It didn't come to the county. So it's for the Dulles Airport. It wasn't Sky Chef, was it? It was, I think this was a some type of sculpture inside the Dulles Airport. I think they're redoing a lounge. And I'm sorry, I don't know much about it because I didn't write the letter and I didn't do the review. So I'm.
The reason the county didn't get it is very simple. It's in Loudoun County.
Right.
Oh, see, I was loving the sheer joy of the county not getting invited to something, but the History Commission getting invited. When can you get one of those?
The terminal is entirely in Loudoun County.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why my colleagues felt the need to write, but they did.
Yeah. Now, if I could add something to that, I was contacted by Docomomo National about this, and they said, well, it's in Fairfax County, so I looked at the map, and indeed, Elise is right, it's not in Fairfax County. The entire terminal complex is in Loudoun County. So I contacted folks I know in Loudoun County, and they said, yep, we're aware of it, we're going to comment on it. But what it is in the base of the original control tower was a lounge designed by, was it Richard Piera, I think, if I remember right? I may be wrong on that name, but a well-known designer in the 1960s of interiors. And they're proposing to actually partially restore it and then reopen it for reuse. And so the Loudoun County Heritage Commission, or whatever their preservation organization is called, and within the county government, did comment to the advisory council on it. So I do know that, and then I passed that information on to Dakamomo, and so that's all I know about. But you're absolutely right, Elise. It is not in our jurisdiction.
Oh, kudos to the History Commission for extending their reach into Loudoun. We do enough reviews there. Will we claim the portion of the property? I don't know. All right, thanks, Denise, for that update. Courthouse repairs letter. Jason drafted an excellent letter for coordinating with the History Commission. I actually just reviewed it and shared with Jason some revisions on it, just adding a few flourishes of my own, indicating that we are urging the county to engage in repairs and appropriate repairs in all haste regarding the courthouse. We also are attaching Jason's photos to it, and hopefully it will be out ideally maybe tomorrow if we have all the luck. But I think the main reason we wanted to bring this up is to keep you updated and talk about who we were going to copy on it, right, Denise?
Yes, that's correct. So at the moment, I just copied the CCs off of a former letter, which may not be appropriate. And then the other question that I had that Jason confirmed is that the clerk of the court, is that right? Or a deputy clerk of the court, and Jason, please correct me, jump in right now because I'm probably stumbling all over this.
John Fry is the clerk of the court, and I think
Yeah.
he should be copied. He was there when we toured, and also Heather Bollinger, who is I don't know her. She's a deputy clerk of some kind, but I think it's like deputy clerk for the historic courthouse. I'm not sure of her exact title, but she was also present and was the one who brought it to our attention. So I think both Ms. Bollinger and Mr. Fry should be copied.
But I've copied Laura Gorey as well, who was a county attorney. I'm not sure that she needs to be copied on this letter. It's just it's a question. And then, of course, the chain of command at DPD, along with the Board of Supervisors and the History Commission and you all.
I personally don't think the county attorney needs to be copied on this particular letter, but I don't feel super strongly about that.
Are there any other suggestions for copies on that, or otherwise I will hopefully get those edits accepted and put some ink on some paper and get it out the door. All right. Hearing none, management plan reviewed. We just seemed like we discussed that already. Does that need any more conversation?
That got moved up to section 106. I just had it in the wrong place.
All right, new business, Wolf Trap National Park Historic District nomination.
Yeah, so unusually, this actually went to the chair of the board, and they are asking for his concurrence with the National Register nomination. So I'm coordinating with the chair's office, and we've asked for comments from the History Commission and the Architecture Review Board by January 17th, which I will compile and attach to my comments, which will go to the chair's office for his review. I've had two comments, one from the History Commissioner from the Drainsville district, which is where Wolf Trap is, that's the district Wolf Trap is in, and Michelle Aubrey from this board, and both thought that the the National Register nomination was sufficient at minimal and learned something while reading it. So we've got 2 thumbs up from 2 different boards.
All right, so get your comments into Denise. And unless you're wanting us to make a motion on it to Denise on it right now, I think you've got 4 days. Tight timeline, but apparently it's worth the read. All right. Any
Thank
additional? You. Oh, sorry.
I just said thank you. Sorry.
Any additional new business? John, you usually got something. Joe, you've got something.
I got a new knee. I mean, I just got my knee operated on, but it's not a replacement. But it's just got it scoped out, but feels 100%. That's all I'm trying to say.
Excellent. I was going to say for I'm very soon going to have a new Daniel in our household.
I know. Congratulations, man.
So
you're growing spare parts.
She'll land somewhere right between the 2 ARB meetings, which likely means I'll be there for February, and I can't saddle Jason with this.
A boy or girl? Boy or girl?
Girl.
Okay, good deal.
One of each.
And you're going to call it Daniela?
No, not Danielle.
Daniela. That'd be pretty
It
good.
would kill me if I mentioned any potential names on a recorded meeting for the county, because then
I gotcha.
Our mothers and mother-in-laws could then go watch it and find out what they are. So I'm not. You can't fall for that trick. I don't care what they paid you, Joe. It's not happening.
All right, man.
All right. If there's no other new business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I like to make a motion for us to adjourn and have a very good Martin Luther King Day.
All right. Thank you, Joe. It's always in order. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good evening and a happy long weekend.
All right. Peace. Bye-bye.
Good evening, everyone.
Peace.
Hi, everyone.